Welcome, everybody, to the St. By Night Twitch stream where we play St. Petersburg By Night, a massive multiplayer 5th edition game of Vampire the Masquerade and Hunter the Reckoning and Werewolf the Apocalypse. But tonight is our After Dark special. We're hoping to host these every week, but we'll be seeing how it works out, where we're going to be doing interviews with players, interviews with storytellers, interviews hopefully with creators of the game, people responsible for the world of Darkness as it exists now, as well as other individuals that have things to contribute to this game or series of games that we love so much. I am Kent, at MishaKent on all social media. I am the lead storyteller of St. Pete by Night, but tonight I'm playing the role of host. I'm here to talk to our marvelous, wonderful guests about a wild and wacky weekend we had last weekend over in San Antonio. For those who didn't know, we were in San Antonio for a special event hosted by Night Studios known as Darkness Emergent. This was the big launch of their new edition of the By Night Studios LARP, and they had just released the rules and created characters and started their setting with Deep in the Heart, a game set in San Antonio, or at least their first location was in San Antonio, where we had Cynthia Marie from LA by Night playing the Prince of San Antonio. But like I said, I am not alone tonight. I have two amazing, wonderful individuals joining me on the stream tonight, and I will let them introduce themselves. Take it away.
Hi, I'm Tyler the Nerd on TikTok, Storytellers St. Petersburg by Night, and I went to the Darkness Emergent convention, LARP, in San Antonio with these guys, and my character was Sean, the Hakata.
Hello, I am Rebecca. I am a storyteller here at St. Pete by Night, and I got to bring Dr. Eloise Cartier-Windsor to the LARP in San Antonio, and it was a hoot.
So, I can't speak for everybody, but I can say for myself, this was actually my first actual convention that I had ever worked or attended at. I had done some small gigs at conventions in the past, but this was the first one I really got to be a part of and enjoy the full experience of. I would ask you both, what is your convention experience? I know one of you is very experienced at conventions, and the other, I'm not sure. So, Tyler, why don't you tell me what your experience has been in the past with conventions as a whole?
Well, I've gone to Anime Expo, Comic Con a whole bunch of times. I usually just roam around the merch floor and buy things, go to a couple panels, watch a couple movies, things like that. But this was the first time I'd been to a LARP, let alone a vampire LARP. So,
And have you been to any like gaming conventions in the past where there was like tabletop and there were panels about games, or was it primarily based around like anime and kind of fandom as a whole?
for a while, it was a lot of Comic Con and anime, but then I've gone to a board game convention up here around LAX. Um, it has a lot of board games and tabletop games. I played some Adventures League. There's a lot of tournaments there for Settlers of Catan and Ticket to Ride and all that stuff. Um, I don't remember any VTM. I think there was some Star Trek VTM games in particular rooms, but they weren't the focus. There's a lot of Dungeons and Dragons, Adventurers League, and board games.
Okay. So, Rebecca, you are an old hat when it comes to conventions. In fact, it was you who really put this whole thing together. I mean, I had heard about it, you'd talked about it some in passing, but you were the one who really made the arrangements for me and for us to be able to be a part of this whole event. And first off, I just want to say thank you for that. We'll get into the details of the event itself, but honestly, this was an amazing opportunity. So why don't you tell everyone a little bit more about your experience with conventions as a whole and maybe how this all came to be?
Okay, yeah. So I've been going to conventions and trade shows and things like that my entire childhood, whether it was like a metaphysical kind of event or Ren Fair. If there's, 20,000 plus people there, I've been going since before I was 5. As an adult, I got the opportunity to work and attend Penny Arcade Expo and Emerald City Comic Con, which are Seattle based. But I found out that Penny Arcade Expo or PAX had locations around the country. So when I had the opportunity to work and get paid to be there to moderate Twitch, that's how I really got my start, moderating, 1,000 or few people in a chat room behind the scenes. I did that in San Antonio. I did that in Boston during PAX East. And then I moved over to working backstage. And so I really got to meet a lot of people. And so as an attendee, I've attended multiple conventions in and out of the country, whether it was MCM in London, Gen Con, Phoenix Fan Fusion. And while I have got paid to work to various capacities, I've also been able to contribute to panels and things. So speaking on certain topics or managing the green room behind the scenes, I've really just loved it, whether it's winning a cosplay contest or what have you. That's really been something that I've just done on and on. I would say on and off, but it's just been every year, on and on, more every year. And so this one specifically, I got into the world of darkness 2 years ago, I guess now 3, coming on when you introduced a lot of us on TikTok. And so through that interaction, I found out about By Night Studio about 2 years ago. I was introduced to some people at Gen Con, and through networking here and there, I found out about this event, and I thought it would be a really good opportunity for us because the way that our server worked before the revamp was similar to a virtual LARP. I know that you had background in LARP, so I'm like, we aren't a LARP in the truest sense, and we don't have the V5 rules for By Night Studio yet. But
Right.
a lot of people had done what we were doing, and that was using the tabletop V5 rules for their LARP, just so that they could get caught up until they got it. So I thought that would be a positive way for us to reach out and get into the community, because even if we did the revamp, we still have all of that experience and how to manage hundreds of people online.
Yeah, absolutely. And before I get into the next question, I want to address everybody who's watching live. First off, thank you so much for joining us. I'm so glad that you're here. Unlike our previous streams, we usually don't highlight the chat, but on tonight's stream, you are able to interact with us live. So if you have questions that you want to put forward about the event or about anything that happens on these After Dark specials, please feel free to submit something into the chat. It should show up over there, and we'll be answering those questions in real time. So feel free to interact with us about this. I'm glad that you brought up LARP and history of LARP. Speaking for myself, my experience with LARP dates back almost as long as my experience with Vampire. I went to my first actual LARPing experience when I was 16. Now, I say that on the brink of turning 40, and I realize just how long ago that is. But I went to my first LARP, which was a D&D live action, live combat LARP with boffer weapons. Now, some may have heard of something like this. The SCA does something kind of similar, although a little more intense. What we were doing, we were literally using PVC pipe that was covered in insulation padding and beating each other to, smithereens. But it was kind of the similar concept where they did have 40 acres of land that they had purchased in Michigan and they had built structures on. It was a fully immersive experience. And I guess that's kind of where I fell in love with LARP. Eventually, I did come to learn of vampire LARPs in and around the campus of the University of Michigan, and I started attending those LARPs. I want to say I was about 18 when I think I went to my first vampire LARP. And it was far and away vastly different than what we saw this weekend. And we'll get into the details about this weekend more. But this was literally people who had postcards on their chest, taped to their chest, that said, I am, 6.5 feet tall, I'm wearing this. Like, some people dressed in costume, which was cool, but a lot of these were poor college kids or, high school students like myself attending this event. So they'd just be dressed in their street clothes and literally have little notations that would say what they were wearing. And we were playing in the student union at the University of Michigan on a second floor that was literally offices that were all locked and closed and hallways representing the streets. So for me, this was kind of cool to see the other end of the spectrum with Darkness Emergent and how much detail and thought they put into and money, to be honest, they put into the venue and everything, and seeing people really decked out in some amazing costumes, which we'll talk about more in a little bit. But let's go over LARP. Let's talk about LARP. What are your experiences with LARP? Have you had, what's kind of the history? Is this your first time? And what did you kind of think about the idea of LARP before attending your first event? Tyler, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I haven't really been to one before. I have hit people with those Boffa weapons in the park a couple times, but no, other than that, I haven't really done it. It's just lightning bolt, that guy on the internet is the only time I've thought about it, really. But seems like fun. Gone to the Ren Fair a couple times, and this is the first time I'd ever been to a full event.
Very cool. What did you think about the idea of this? I mean, you'd seen the silliness that can be LARPs from internet memes and stuff like that. But what were your initial impressions before the event, heading to it? Were you kind of like nervous? Were you excited? Kind of what was your thoughts about the idea of what was about to take place?
Before the event, I really wasn't too sure. I had seen more media or just play Bloodlines, and you think of Elysium. So, like, what would it be? Or Asylum, excuse me. We had an Elysium, and I just imagined it would be in a nice venue, and it was. So I just sat there and kind of absorbed it. Didn't really know what to expect. But I expected it to be pretty chill, and it was, unless you were running around doing all the things they had set up.
Trying to get to everything all in one night. Rebecca, what about you? I know your experience with LARP is also fairly limited, but you got kind of like an early chance to get involved in a vampire LARP before this one, so you had a little bit of a better idea. Tell us about your experience with LARP and maybe what your impressions were before your first event, and then after and before Darkness Emergent.
Yeah, I went to Gen Con this year in 2023, and they did an intro to LARP or LARP Light during the day. And so I was able to help facilitate with that. There's a little snafu between who was going to be running it. So I and another individual were able to say, we're here. We know V5. We've run Tabletop, and really all we're going to do is kind of give people an introduction to what V5 is, what the changes are to clans, and give them 3 starting disciplines. And what would you do if you were newly embraced, and how would you interact with others if there were no individuals standing by to say, hey, I'm your sire, and you have these 2 individuals, you have this Anarch Tmitsi and then, Camarilla Venture, who are like, what the heck is going on here? And that gave people the opportunity on those 3 days to kind of learn a little bit of mechanics and some hand signals for LARP, because if you haven't done it before and someone comes up and does this, you might not know what that means, or if they're doing hand signal near their ear or their face, there's some nuances to it that might vary LARP to LARP, but on the whole, there are hand signals. And so having that opportunity to help people in real time with myself, because I'm also I didn't know. I knew the Rochambeau thing, which is sometimes how some people decide who wins or gets through with whatever it is that they're doing, whether it's a conversation, combat, or otherwise. So being able to do that intro and help those people really helped for the 3-night LARP that they had there. And really getting to be part of that set up the expectation, because while we were there in San Antonio, it wasn't actually an Elysium. They never called it an Elysium. So even though it was a fancy event and the prince was there and like the majority of the court, some of us were sitting there under the impression that it would be or could be that. And so why are there guru here? And why is there a hunter? And
Anarchs
why is there a
and
mage?
mages
This is a
and
chaotic Elysium. It wasn't technically an Elysium, but doing that LARP at Gen Con kind of helped set the stage, because where World of Darkness is concerned, there's a lot of history. And so it is definitely a balance. And I knew going into that, you're going to have people who physically just showed up and a friend said, here's a character sheet. Thanks for being my +1. And then others who have been LARPing and have not stopped, and they
absolutely.
know World of Darkness. They eat, breathe, and live it, and so they're on it. They know it, and so it can be chaotic when you're integrating different things, because the new person and involving themselves with a mage, not knowing what a mage and an Elysium type setting is going to be wildly different than, say, a really old Malkavian or a really old Venture, who in this situation did not have anything to do with that mage, because we're like, no,
Yeah.
why would we?
So, what would you say was the biggest differences between the Gen Con experience and the Darkness Emergent experience?
So that was LARP Light. That was an intro. That was very much meant to be, hey, this is coming up. LARP might have had a little siesta, but it is definitely, alive and well, and it's coming back. Get into it, because once it starts, it's not going to stop. And we saw that on the By Night server, where they already have their rough date slash timetable for the next 2 years. So I think that comparing the two, I would say that they are prepared. They have their story, they have their venue, they have things ahead of time. They will deliver that when they say that they have it. If you came from a story, so I have this paperwork. They gave us this like paper. It's like a whole like dossier on the event. So like you're not, I wouldn't say you're not lost, but I would say that if you read and you have the things to read, you have really good insight. Like they provided emails through the entire event,
Oh, yeah. And text
you know,
messages.
and text messages. So they are very like dedicated to you having that experience. And I think that that was a similarity between Gen Con and Darkness Emergent, where they were communicative, even when they're like, oh, that last email, disregard that one. They were on it though. And
Yeah.
there's some places I've gone to cons where it's like you physically show up before you find out something's not happening. It's like, oh, well, that's sad, but they're, you know,
Yeah, I didn't sign up for the text messaging, but I could recall almost every day of the event getting at least 5 emails. Like they were really on top of trying to notify you of what was going on, where it was happening, what the procedure was. So I did really appreciate the level of effort they put into making sure that contact and communication was happening. What did you think about like the differences in experience level between the two? It seems like, you go to Gen Con, you're expecting a Gen Con experience, so you're not necessarily familiar with World of Darkness, you're not necessarily familiar with LARP per se, whereas this was an event that was primarily centered around the LARP experience. Like you were coming for the LARP. Yes, there were extras, some provided by us, which we'll get into shortly, but also, that was the main course. That's what people really had traveled from all over the world, seemingly, to attend, was the LARP. So we saw, or at least I could say from my experience, a vast level of experience amongst most people who were there. At Gen Con, it sounded like it was possibly like a major variety, a lot more on the inexperienced side than the experienced side. Would you say that's the case?
I would say that the spread of individuals at Gen Con was probably on brand with those that were at the Darkness Emergent event. I think the difference is that people have a year to plan for Gen Con.
Mhm.
And even if Darkness or By Night Studios LARP was the only uh, vampire LARP or By Night LARP that they ran there, there's other LARPs there. So even if it was a new to By Night or vampire, people had LARPed before. So I think that when you go to when people were going to Darkness Emergent, they were more often than not going because they were vampire fans. But at Gen Con, they might not have been a vampire fan, but they were into nerdy stuff. So
Sure.
I think that the spread there was pretty even. And because they did offer the LARP Light on 3 of those days, and we did 2 sessions a day for 3 days. So there wasn't a day that people couldn't drop in and talk to myself or Maquette and say, like, hey, can you explain what feral, whispers is, or these claws things that I did, or, you know, what does this do? And so, and we gave them hands-on. And so while we didn't necessarily have that at Darkness Emergent, they had a ton of storytellers, and they had people like where they had the little show floor, the vendor hall. There were people connected to By Night there, accessible at all times, like throughout the weekend, you know. So I'd say it was pretty comparable.
So now I want to kind of take us through a slight timeline, as it were, of how this all came to be, how we got there, what our experience was each day there, and kind of what our afterthoughts were afterwards. But let's start with kind of how this happened. I mean, you were the point person who kind of said like, hey, we've got this server, we've got people who play vampire, you're hosting this event, and kind of put that together. And that was, at least as far as I can recall, 6 months in the making before the event itself actually happened. So with what you can say, I know there's some things that we can't say, obviously, publicly, but with what you can say, kind of describe, how did you hear about it? How did you hear about the LARP and the event coming together? How did you get in contact with them? And how did it kind of come to St. Pete getting the invitation?
So I got invited by a TikToker actually to work a booth at a convention, and they were selling books for By Night Studio, and that was Modern Artifice on TikTok. And they're on
One
a
of our players
server
now, too.
now, one of our players too. And so they're a dice maker, and they had the ability to sell the books through By Night Studio, and so or on their own. And so, long story short, convention after convention, when it came to selling books, no matter what convention they've gone to, if there was a convention that I was at, I sold and have to date sold more books for By Night Studio at conventions than anyone else. Just because I'm like, here, this is good. I love Cult of the Blood Gods. Read this book, and people buy them.
Well, and
And
that's
so,
wild considering your vampire experience is less
mhm,
than 2 years old. It's about to hit about the 2 year point, because when you came to St. Pete,
mhm.
you had zero experience. You had nothing coming into
No.
this. And then
Mhm,
over the past year, you've learned so much that you're a storyteller now,
mhm.
and you can talk about the game knowledgeably.
Right. Yeah, and so that helped immensely. So thanks, Kent, for, inspiring me and other people. But it was clear that, where the passion can be put out there, that I think that there are a lot of people who are VTM fans. They just don't know that there's people playing. And so being able to get people interested and say, I'm with 200 other nerds on St. Pete by Night, if we're out here, they're out there. From Washington to Florida, Alaska, Hawaii, they're everywhere. Brazil, London, we've had players in Italy, just you name the area, we have players. And I know that we are not the only community. So internationally the players exist. And if I can come in contact with a lot of them, and inspire and or get them into it, it's been great overall. But where the Darkness Emergent comes in is that I had found out about it probably earlier this year, and so I love San Antonio. I'll put that out there. That doesn't I like to travel, so if it's in a city I like and I know, and Kent and I had spoke about this, like Kent had been in San Antonio in the not so recent past, so
A
he is
year ago,
kind of
almost to the
familiar with
day.
it. Yeah, and I've been to San Antonio multiple times for PAX South, which is no longer. But I also have been to Texas multiple times for just fun to see friends and family. So um, knowing the location, knowing some of the contacts at By Night kind of helped it. And I said, hey, where cons or conventions or conferences are concerned, there's usually things on an agenda because people like to do a variety of things. And if you go to a larger convention, you'll see that there's panels, there's gaming rooms, there's things at night, there's after parties, there's private parties. And so I knew that while we weren't necessarily a LARP, we did have the virtual LARP-esque feel to our first 5 seasons with how the way that St. Pete by Night was structured. And they were like, oh, that's really cool. And the fact that we had, 50 plus people show up was also awesome. Did we LARP? No, there were some people who really did want to LARP, though ahead of time there's a big question about whether or not we were going to LARP at our first meetup, and we decided against it because there wasn't like a really like clear-cut way to include everyone because we were very much like West Marches, and if you do something it's in character. And we didn't want to exclude anyone, so we just didn't. And also we didn't have the V5 rules for LARP yet. So that kind of like hindered that. But through talking with individuals over on that side, they were like, oh, that's really cool. Because I think one of the things to think about with LARPs is that 50 is a good number for a LARP, but not all of them bring in 50 people.
No.
You might show up and be with 8 or 15.
No, I can definitely speak to that in a lot of because I did attend several LARP events where there would be maybe a dozen people. And if you didn't have a previous connection with those people, it could feel very isolating. It could feel very kind of you were on the outside looking in of people who'd been playing together for a long time. And so yeah, you can't always expect those kinds of numbers. You can't always expect that you're going to get a massive variety of people who are even outgoing. I mean, again, speaking of my experience at Darkness Emergent, like I was surprised how social so many of the people there were. And I think that was a testament to the way they'd set up the game, a way they'd set up the storylines and the plots and the quests for the different groups that kind of forced you to interact. If you wanted to succeed, you had to interact. And so I liked that. Whereas, again, at the old LARPs, I had no idea what was going on. I didn't, wasn't given any quests. I was just basically been told that, like, you're a part of the world. Good luck. Like, we'll see what happens. Yeah. And so it was put a lot of pressure on me, especially as an 18-year-old kid playing with like 30s and 40-year-olds, to kind of step up and try to introduce myself and get in with that crowd. And so the opposite being the experience here was very, very refreshing. It was very, very nice to see an alternative that people could be and show off their charisma, whereas you could also kind of stay to the back or stay out of it if you wanted to, and it was just very, very, very nice. I want to take
your
it back.
blood bag and sit in the corner,
Yeah, exactly.
Take a blood bag or two. They had actual blood bags at the event.
They sure did. And they were free too, which was amazing.
And they were included in the cost, so
they were. So I want to take it a little bit further back than that because we found out how we kind of figured out about this event and how we got involved. But I want to talk about just your guys' experience with Vampire. We kind of mentioned yours a little bit, Rebecca, saying that St. Pete introduced you to this. But I would ask Tyler, how did you come to hear about Vampire? Had you heard about it at all before? And it was something that, like, once you heard it was drumming up, you were like, oh, I'll check it out? Or was it that you hadn't heard a single word about it? And when I started doing TikTok lives or whatever is when you'd first heard about it. But, how did you get introduced to the world of Darkness and Vampire the Masquerade?
Well, I've seen the Jade Green rule book from, 1999 era and checked it out, saw the art, played one session of Dark Ages or Vampire the Masquerade that my friend set in the Dark Ages. We didn't know what we were doing. And then I hadn't really played it at all other than Bloodlines until 2 years ago, I saw you on TikTok making character sheets with everyone. So I watched you make 100 character sheets. And then I was like, I can do that. So I did my character sheet and came to St. Pete. And then we basically did 50 LARPs a year? 50
Something like
LARPs
that.
total, something like that. Just
Stuff. Yeah.
we're doing Elysium in a week, and then we spread it out and slowed it down. Yeah,
We had to.
I've done
We just had to eventually.
I've done a couple dozen online LARPs in St. Pete since then. I didn't really know what that was, so
Well, I was
I
so
figured it out.
amazed by you as one of the new incomers because I did go through 100 people kind of seeing the varying levels of experience and having heard that you had played so little when you first came to me to finalize your character. I was absolutely blown away. Like, I was like, this guy's done his homework. He found a really fancy sheet to fill out. Like, he built a solid character. And I remember Charles was not intended when you built him to be the Primogen, to be an important figure within the game, but I was so impressed by you that I chose to kind of push you into that role, for better or for worse. That's up to each person
Hmm.
to determine, but I think you did a phenomenal job, and I was just really, really honored and impressed with how much you dove into the setting and into the system and into designing this character, and even at the last minute making the changes I asked you to make when I was like, hey, guess what, you're the Primogen now because like you're who I think is most capable of doing the job. And that was incredible. What was that? What did you feel when that happened, when that process was going on? I mean, obviously you created the character, but what did you feel about the whole being shoved into power suddenly?
Well, I was making a character, and it really did fall into place. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna make a Catholic guy that's struggling with his mortality or his damnation or his curse, and then he's gonna be a college guy, party animal, and then it's like, okay, well now he's just a 200-year-old college guy, party animal, but he's in charge. So that was interesting. Uh, you know, my character matched Isabel well, and that was nice. Figured it out. Had some rough times in the beginning when didn't know what was doing. You just gotta
You learn by
be stern
doing.
and keep the Toreador in line, but that's hard. They're all out doing parties and stuff constantly. So
Well, especially since it sounds like your first experience with a non traditional table game. Like, you weren't
hmm
playing with just five other players. You were playing, I think that clan was the biggest clan at the start of the game. I think it had 14 or 16 players at launch. That's a lot to take on. But I will say, I loved your character so much. I had actually tweaked Isabel to better match your character based off of the work you had done and kind of some of the details you'd provided. The prince was definitely not at the start of the game what I had intended when I was planning the game. So that there is,
hmm
that's a compliment to you for how cool Charles was as a character, that I wanted to take some of the inspiration from that and forge Isabel a little bit more.
very cool.
Um, Rebecca, you knew nothing about World of Darkness. I kind of lured you in through the TikTok lives and everything to try out this experience with me. And I remember the first thing you asked was, "Could I play a werewolf
Yes.
in Vampire the Masquerade?" Tell me kind of about what your experience was like. Had you heard anything about Vampire before we started talking, or had you come across it in any other capacity, even if you didn't directly get involved? Had it touched your life, I guess, in any way before St. Pete started?
Nope. Never heard of it. No, I'm relatively new to TTRPGs as a whole. I play a lot of video games. My world is video games. Like, we want to talk about diamond, plat level League of Legend play, that's me. But in terms of like TTRPG, I mean, I think 20 years ago I kind of got into the tabletop world ish because the husband was into Warhammer 40K, and so I got an army and played that. And they have a fantasy game as well on the site. So I knew about that, which is kind of grungy, but it wasn't the World of Darkness. So when people were telling me these things, I had played, and I hadn't even played D&D really. I like when it came to TTRPG as a whole, I just wasn't really aware of all of it. Like I played a bunch of different games, but not like specifically World of Darkness. There was absolutely nothing in my childhood. And so, and we're talking like I'm 40. Like this is like 40 year, like, 35 years of not having any connection to it, other than hearing about it on TikTok for the first time 3 years ago. And I liked it. I had watched a lot of media. Like I had friends who were very into Anne Rice growing up, and I really loved the underworld movies. So I wasn't anti-vampire. I wasn't a huge fan either though. Like, I didn't have like, and I live next door to Forks, Washington. So like Twilight's been everywhere here for
Yeah.
a long time. So I just jumped in, but also, ADHD powers of hyperfixation and learning about things.
And I promise we'll get back to Darkness Emergent here, since that's what most of you are here to hear about. But I wanted to give a little bit of context. What was, based off of your both of your kind of TTRPG experiences, Rebecca, yours only being like maybe a year, if of that, before joining St. Pete. What was the transition like between D&D and World of Darkness? Because both of you were at least had experience with D&D coming in. What did you think was like the biggest or most difficult transition, and what did you kind of find that appealed to you about World of Darkness versus like a D&D? Tyler, start with you.
Well, in St. Pete, what I really did have fun with is the map and the territories and domain and all those things. It really is a game about politics most of the time if you're um, going over the basics of domains and things like that, because you're not allowed to kill anyone. You don't have the right of destruction, and you have to work things through, or you have to do it in a Cold War type way where you get the better of each other without really doing anything, or doing the least and doing the most at the same time. So it was interesting.
Okay, so
Definitely had a lot of different rivals and people that were player characters instead of NPCs.
yeah, World of Darkness definitely preaches taking a more political, social angle onto handling problems, whereas D&D, you got spells, you attack and kill the BBEG, like it's pretty straightforward. In this, there's a lot more subtlety, a lot more manipulation and conniving and backstabbing that goes into it. And I can see that having been a stumbling point for certain players. I thought both of you did perfectly fine with it, but for certain players, that I think is one of the biggest adjustments I see is they're like, why can't I just kill them? And I'm like, well, it's against the rules of the city, first off. So if you
Mm-hmm.
do that, you're going to have a short stay here. Secondly, it's just there's so many other things to consider about how you play your character and how you approach the game. Plus, the rules aren't tailored to combat. It's not a combat system. It is much more heavily into knowledges, lore, and social skills than it is combat based. So I think that was also kind of like a well, how do I? People had to start thinking in other ways and think outside the box about how they were going to resolve issues. But yeah, that's very good information. Rebecca, what was kind of you had seemed I remember when we were talking originally, you had seemed pretty comfortable and settled into D&D. Like you were playing warlocks or die, like that was your thing. And you were running, I think you ran a one shot around the time that we were starting this up. Like you were getting comfortable like dipping your toes into being a DM. Then I throw all of this at you and say, hey, here's a brand new system. What was that transition for you like?
I It was interesting for me because I've always maintained that I'm 1% D&D, 99% everything else. I tell everyone this, but I try to play as many TTRPG systems in a year. I just like learning and playing, and there's so many different indie games out there that are interesting that really dip into the storytelling and the narrative aspect, and I really appreciate that more than what is available in D&D. And I had played D&D, I think, like many others, because that's what so many people know and that's all they'll play. So if it's between playing something or not playing, well then I'll play D&D, but if I have the option, I would never play D&D again.
Yeah, I mean
Because
that.
it's just not my favorite. I would rather play Delta Green, which is gritty, or Call of Cthulhu, where you're still, fighting against things that go bump in the night. However, World of Darkness really has all of the different areas of their lore that really expand on that. And I think that the crossover or jumping into World of Darkness for me wasn't because I was going from playing D&D frequently or as frequently as other games, but catching up on 30 years of lore, because I didn't have that. And so when it came to character creation and you're like, you can't be a werewolf, and I'm like, but it's in lore. Like in the world, werewolves and vampires go together, but in World of Darkness, that is a V5 game that we didn't have the mechanics for. So it wasn't, no, you can't play a werewolf, no, you can't play yet. And I think
Right.
that's the difference. But not knowing that, because I don't know the World of Darkness, I don't know the splats, I don't know the games, that was harder for me to wrap my head around. Because like in D&D, when you jump in, everything's available. If you've never played D&D before, 5e is extensive. But when we were coming into V5 for Vampire the Masquerade, we had a book, maybe, if you could get it.
Yeah.
And now we have a ton of books for Vampire, and we have more than one book for Hunter.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and so I think that was one of, not necessarily difficult, but mm, it really slowed down the progression of what you had or what I could get. Not only because, like I said, I didn't want to support online mega corporations, but I wanted to buy local. And so I didn't get my book until the week our game started, because I was bound and determined to get it from my local game store, but it was so hard. And I had like a
Absolutely.
4-month lead. And so I think that was part of the difficulty, is that not necessarily that I had a D&D mindset, but because I had so much available, like WotC kind of spoils, you know, their players and their fan base. They're great for providing it, but where production was concerned, it was harder for me as a player to get into it because I physically couldn't get the info.
No, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, it was fifth edition. A lot of people don't realize had been like kind of in the works since about 2017, 2016. And they'd released versions of it 2019, I think, is might have been when the first book came out. Um, and they actually re-released it in 2021. And part of the reason it was taking so long to get its footing is it could not find a steady production company or publisher. So it was, we kind of came in at a fortuitous time where the game finally had started to find its footing, and we were starting to get more supplements, and they'd settled in with Renegade, and Paradox was a little more stable, and the game was finally actually starting to take off. But it had been a rough road. So while the game had been around 4 years or 3 years when we'd started, they didn't have a lot. They didn't have a lot of options, and now we're seeing Hunter and Werewolf, and everything's starting to roll out at a more steady pace. It took time to get there. So as much as I would say, World of Darkness has everything too, we just didn't have the material for it. And I'm not a person who's comfortable making stuff up for, especially when it's clearly on the way, when it's clearly in the plan. So it was kind of frustrating for me to tell you no, because I did know the lore, I did know ways Werewolf could come in, but I did not want to do anything that, a year, 2 years later, I'd have to be like, well, none of that made sense. We have to, undo everything we've already done. So I'm going to turn to some questions we've gotten in chat. The first one comes from Cole, one of our wonderful storytellers and community members since day one. She says, "What was your most memorable moment from Darkness Emergent?" Tyler, we'll start with you. Can't hear you, bud.
There was quite a few of them. It was just good to hang out with you guys and see my friends and chill out. Um, Once we get to the party, it was really nice, blood bags and little steak bites. So just hanging out there and seeing all the different characters. It's hard to pick just one, you know.
Yeah. Okay, Rebecca.
I would say it was a couple things. So we were a little confused, and then we had a team. Our faction were mercenaries, and we were a little confused. So then we just became a bunch of menaces. So I think that was a fun turning point for us, where it's like, don't be part of the problem, be the whole problem, and we had fun. Organized fun. And so what we were doing is we had established a couch. So it's a beautiful venue. It was like one whole side had like a DJ and all these like tall tables, open bar. And on the other side of this venue upstairs, you could fit like 200 people on each side. Like it's huge. But on the other side had a bunch of couches and chairs and formal sitting areas. And we had taken a corner in a room. It was the only double couch area in the corner by a walkway. And so all of the factions had items that they were getting, and we were like acquiring them. I wouldn't say stolen. We didn't steal them. We acquired them.
We got to them first.
We got to them first, and we were hiding them behind our couch so no one could find their stuff. But we were mercenaries, so we're like, well, we acquired it, And so I think that was like just having that ability to have fun that way was like, But there was another moment in RP where Marcus, who was one of our players, had decided to split off from the faction and go do an SI raid at a warehouse. And so he was out on the balcony doing SI stuff. They must have been out there for like 2 hours in like 80-degree weather. And they were troopers. They got like 3 of our objectives done in one thing, which was great. But we were kind of like, after our shenanigans were had and, people started raising eyebrows at us, we decided to go help them. And when we showed up, poor Marcus was like one hit away from getting into torpor. And Kent and I wouldn't say that we like stacked our character sheets, but between the two of us, they gave us a lot of XP, which was fantastic. But Kent and I did it more than Kent, but like 90 to 90, I'd say on my sheet, 99% of my XP went into 2 disciplines. I got up to 5 dots in the one and 4 dots in the other. And so when it came to getting into a fisticuff, I was not going down. And then Kent, his character sheet just had equal amounts of tomfoolery that between the two of us, we were a wrecking crew. And then you add in the Hakata, Sean, from Tyler's character, and it's like, there's no way. So anyways, we walked out there. Marcus's character was almost dead. And I'm like, and then, he's like, well, it can go this way or that way. And it was a really cool moment with the storyteller because Kent's like, so are you open to a creative idea? And he's like, yeah, I'd love that. So Kent kind of negotiated with him. And, it's kind of like the rule of cool and the yes and idea in storytelling. And so Kent took 1 ag damage. I took 2. We weren't going to argue it out. Kent, I think that between the 3 of us, we were like, let's do this to the bloody end. But it was clear that at that time they had been out there in the 80-degree weather. And there had been some people who were doing some megaphone competing arguments on the street corner down below. It was loud. It was hot. It was SI. And, they were bloodied. So we're like, you know what? We're going to pull these guys out and be done with it. And so that was a really cool moment for me, just because I'm like, I'm using my disciplines and I'm going to use my disciplines.
Well, and I think afterwards we had kind of come to the conclusion or the idea that we weren't supposed to survive. Like they weren't supposed to survive. We weren't supposed to win that encounter. That was supposed to be a death trap, and somehow everybody made it out alive. And so I think it was one of those like, yeah, we could have played it out to the bitter end, but I don't think they had a bitter end ready for that. Like, I think the bitter end would have been we all die because it would have just kept going and going and going and going and going. But yeah, that was a very cool cool moment of that night. I think that based, what you guys are saying is like, from my personal experience, it was kind of hard to get a foothold on anything at first because I was like, I don't even know who's who. Like, I don't know who the important people are. I don't know who the storytellers are. I don't know who to go to about stuff. I was kind of lost, and I think that that took me back to uh, uh, a lesson I'd learned in previous LARPing that I think we've all learned at this point, which is make your own fun.
Hmm.
You know, don't ruin other people's fun by any means, but like find a way to create your own fun within the fun they've provided. LARP, as opposed to tabletop and table games, the storyteller's not there to entertain you. Like they're not there to come to you specifically and bring the fun to you. In a LARP setting, when you've got, I think they had 5 storytellers or 6 storytellers managing 120 people, you have to find your own fun. You have to seek them out. They're not going to come to you and be like, "What are you doing?" Like, okay, like let me try to lure you in. You have to do it yourself, and that's kind of something that we've learned in St. Pete as well. It's like I had said, it's always a player-driven game. I'm not going to come to you and try to prompt you into doing stuff. You need to seek out the stuff yourself. um
I
but
will
as
say,
far as, yeah, go ahead.
to that point, they even with that in mind, they did a really good job. They had at least one storyteller who was stationary, who was in the corner asking, people, are you okay? And then they had someone else who was roaming, and when I had said, hey, X, Y, and Z, he was like, here is the NPC you need, and walked me to them. So really, where other LARPs might be concerned, they really were, there, to help. They genuinely did want to help if you knew how to ask or what to ask.
Absolutely. And I think, all said, I think their hearts were in the right place. I do have some ideas and things that I think could have been improved upon personally from a player perspective. I've for the longest time been from the administrative perspective, so it was interesting to be on the player side of things again. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Another question we got, let me see. Was there anything in Darkness Emergent, and this comes from Hugo Boss, one of our players, that made it unique from other LARPs? Rebecca, since you're the only other one with LARP experience, what was kind of the difference between this and the one at Gen Con, or any of the other experiences you've had with more live action role playing?
Uh, and I will say, I haven't done some of the experience that's similar to this is I've done a significant amount of murder mystery parties, which I feel like is similar.
Same thing. It's the same thing.
It's very similar to murder mystery parties, and I've done a lot of those. The who done it, who can you talk to, who can you trust, and what information are other people looking for that you need to keep private. Very similar, right? What makes it different? Is that the exact question? I want to make sure I don't answer it wrong.
But yeah, what made Darkness Emergent different than other LARP experiences you've had?
So from what I know is, one, it's a ongoing LARP experience. So you don't have to go to one or the other. But if you do go to each one, it's ongoing. So if I were to bring Dr. Eloise back, there will be people there at every LARP. However, the difference is that it's not in the same city. It's in different cities. So that makes it different. When you're going to RP in Detroit, you're going to the VFW in Detroit. When you're going to do Darkness Emergent, you're going to this fancy hotel, this nice hotel that's in San Antonio. And the next one is going to be in Chicago. And what's cool about that is that when you go to another LARP that's in one city at one location, you're building your lore. But because they are moving and they're going to cities that have V5 lore established, you're not stuck with the same prince. That makes it different. You're not stuck with just doing Elysium. That makes it different. You're not just stuck with, insert something that you can only have in a stationary thing. And I think the other thing that sets it apart, it's fancy.
It was very,
It's
very fancy.
It is a fancy event. Like, you pay, your ticket price is going to be our ticket prices. People paid between $150 up to $700 for this event. And the other thing is that if you were paying on the higher end, you had 3 days. When you go to a LARP in your hometown, You might go to the bar before or after, and then you get your 3 hours.
Yep.
That's it. Like, it is not, you are not getting this curated email list. You're not getting this, like, handout, this, like, nice handout. You're not getting, we got gift bags with ornaments, and we got gifts.
There was
We had
a
panels.
marketplace. They had the
Yes.
vendors hall full of.
Mhm.
You could get a VR experience.
Yes.
You could get
Yeah.
molded fangs. You could get all the merch you could
Mhm.
possibly think of. Like for the most part, like it was. There were a lot of things that came with this experience that you wouldn't get from a hometown LARP. The
Yeah.
impression I got is the purpose of these events is to, one, inspire home games back home, that you have your local LARP and that you represent that local LARP at these big events. So in Werewolf they call them moots, in Vampire they might call them conclaves or elysiums, where it's people are invited from all over the world to represent their local branch at these big gatherings. So they have kind of, it's more focused on like the overall world plot than it is just your personal game back home. And I think that's what they're trying to do, is they're trying to set up satellite locations so that you can play on a more regular basis back at your home game, but then you go to these big grandiose events and see, touch base with people who are playing in other games. And that's what it seemed to me is what they were trying to establish or set up through these events. But yeah, the fact that it is ongoing, you can take your character from the first event to the next event, which is, I believe, in May in Chicago, is what we're hearing. You can take the same character and their experiences that happen between now and May and bring them to this event for another kind of conclave, as it were, gathering of all of these individuals from all over the world, which is really, really, really cool. As far as my experience from LARPs versus this one, money plays a huge factor. They spared very little expense on this. They went all out. They rented an amazing, amazing facility, which you wouldn't have even known existed if it wasn't for them, I don't think. This upstairs kind of rental place. They decorated. They got an open bar with the blood bags. Like, they put a lot of effort. They got coins, which I'll show one of them now. I don't know if it'll show up on the camera, but I'll try to. They got this kind of currency that was part of the game. It has the Darkness Emergent branding on there. Like, they put effort into props and into setting and scenery, and Cynthia Marie was done up to the nines. Like, a lot of people spared no expense on this, and nor should they. If you're gonna spend $700 to be there for the weekend, you would hope that it's gonna be a higher class, fancy affair. And I feel like they delivered. The food, I mean, just the food alone, the steak and butter sauce that they served the night of the event was unreal. Like, this, they put a lot of money into it, and in a lot of previous LARPing experiences, like I talked about the college campus LARP, there was no money put into that. I think they got the venue for free because one of them worked at the university. Like, there were no props unless you brought them yourself. It was a very kind of use your imagination situation over a, we're going to actually create physical representations of everything. I mean, we saw one player who did Nosferatu to the nines. At least one. I think there were more than one. But this specific player, I think their name was Buffy. They did Nosferatu to the nines with the bald cap and like the pointed ears and makeup and the whole works. So like, people were really, really pulling out the stops, and I think that's so important. Immersion is so important, and they delivered on that. I truly believe they did. So it was nice to see the money going to the product, that you weren't going to pay $700 and show up and get something you could have probably done with your friends for free in a VFW somewhere, or like, in a moose lodge. It definitely did feel like a full no holds barred encounter, which I really appreciated. Follow-up question from Hugo Boss. Another question: what was your favorite character from this event? It could be player or NPC. Tyler, who was your favorite character from the event?
I don't know. There was a lot of good ones. Shout out to Angelica de la Sombra, who might be watching. They were in our faction, the Chimera. They were hanging out with us for a little while, and then they would run around and get all the info. Buffy was pretty cool. I saw them running around as the Nosferatu. There was a lot of different people there, and just noticing them in passing, doing their own thing, was a lot of the fun.
Yeah. Rebecca.
Oh, the ones that I interacted with, anyone who was a Nosferatu, like it was a Nosferatu prince and it was a Nosferatu knight. It was just the people who showed up as Nos really went in with the SFX makeup. Like really, we had our Harpy Herald Tick, who was fantastic and really enjoyed the interactions with them. And then I think it was the Seneschal who was just like with his draped over cloak thing and really menacing in the corner. Those two stood out. And then there was it was interesting because I had the opportunity. They had set up an in-character connections channel, and they didn't put a cap on it. Like sometimes people will say like, hey, if you're new to the city, you're probably not going to know more than 1 or 2 people. They did not put a cap on it, so I took advantage of that and had 10 plus connections coming into it. 10%, 10 out of the 100 people who were there knew my name in a positive way, and I took advantage of that. So seeing those people that night was really interesting, not because they were necessarily my favorite, but because I knew that other people came up to me because of them and said that I was positive or my name was being used. And so that was, special shout out to those people.
Well, and I think by the end, more people knew your name than at the beginning. I think you with how much you were bopping around and making those connections and getting the most boons in the game by the end of the night, I think a lot of people
status.
They knew your name. I think that my favorites would be the Seneschal. They just had a great presence. They knew how to carry themselves. They definitely put effort into being kind of mysterious with a hood and like covering, and you really never saw their face and you never saw them break character that much. Like they were always kind of posed doing their thing. And then, yeah, big shout out to Cheshire who played Tick. He also processed all of the characters for this game. He finalized all of the characters for this game. And I can say, having done that, it is a demanding and not an easy job, but he was an all-star about it. He never got shitty with anybody or seemed to like take an attitude. He was happy to please, and he came in as the Herald, the Nosferatu Herald / Harpy, and he did such a good job. Like he made that night for me because like I never really got to talk to the Prince, never got to talk to the Seneschal, but I got to talk to Tick, and he did a really, really good job of getting with everybody and kind of really making himself known. So big ups to that. Side tangent, I will say though, Cynthia Marie is too pretty to play a Nosferatu. I had no idea. Until the end of the night, I had no idea she was supposed to be a Nosferatu. And because she had this kind of like sugar skull makeup on, which was apparently supposed to be her face. But the reality of it is she's just too gorgeous. She's too pretty. And yeah, it was just impossible to tell. But she also did a good job. You got a vibe from her that she was this kind of spooky, off-putting prince at times, and that was very, very cool. So let's kind of get back to the timeline after this slight divergence. So we made the first contact, and we were asked to be involved with the game or with the setting. After a meeting, we kind of started. We're asked, what do you want to do? What do you want to do at the event? Which at first, for me, having no con experience, I was kind of like, I don't know. What do you want us to do? Like, I have no idea. Because details were very vague still at that time. And this was 3 months ago, or 3 months before the event, I want to say. We didn't know quite what was going to happen. We'd heard some things, like we'd gotten some brief, vague rundowns of how the weekend was going to work, but we really didn't know genuinely what we were getting into or what we even had access to in terms of resources. Some we didn't even know about until the weekend we were there, like the days of the things is when we were told, oh, hey, you might have a projector, by the way. So it was kind of a little bit stumbly, stuttery at first for us to figure out how to get involved, but eventually we did take control. And Rebecca and I, after talking, had said, hey, we'll run some table games and we'll do a couple panels. I didn't even know if this was going to be a con that was going to have panels, let alone the means to do a panel. But I was like, this is what we can throw out and see if they take it, see if they bite, see if this is something that they're even interested in having, because we had no idea what it is they wanted from us or how they wanted us to be involved. Uh, Again, Rebecca, and I promise Tyler I'll have more questions from you. What was kind of your experience with during that process of us trying to like figure out how to show up to this thing, what we were going to be doing?
Yeah, it's always a balance when you're going to a con, doing all of the things and not feeling like you're missing out. And I knew that there was only 2 days plus a minimal amount of time on Sunday, but we were all flying out on Sunday. So having that past con experience, I kind of said, hey, I know our capacity. I know who's going to be there. We'll do a couple games and we'll do a couple panels. And so we, proposed that, and they're like, sure, we're going to have a couple panels on our end. We'll take a couple panels from you. Bada bing, bada boom. And so we decided to go with a couple panel ideas that I wouldn't say is synonymous with LARP, but could be anywhere in the world of darkness, whether you're, you know, doing TTRPG or doing the LARP side. And so we came up with a character creation panel. We almost had 10 people attend that, which is pretty good. And then the other one, we had over 10 people show up, and that was community building. And we really showed the two different ways that we had developed St. Pete and how we managed it. We were able to show them through the projector, which is awesome because Kent was able to hook up his laptop and show all of our channels, all, 200 of them on our side. And so they were really able to get a better idea of how to organize it. And so that was kind of how we proposed it. And they're like, yeah, sure, we'll have you. We want, I think like where Kent says he just wants it to get out there and get people involved in the world of Darkness by Night also is that way. I think that's really cool about the world of darkness and people who are involved is like whether you're on the LARP side or the tabletop side, uh, you know, publishing side, wherever you fall, video game or otherwise, people just are happy that someone else likes something else in the world of darkness. So the by night people were like, if you're tabletop, that's fine. There's going to be tabletop people there too. So
Yeah, and I
we'll
think
have you.
that there really hasn't been a World of Darkness convention that I can recall. I may have been far too young at the time that they were happening. I mean, I started the game when I was 13 years old. So there may have been conventions back in the 90s, but for the most part, World of Darkness has never had its own convention. D&D, they've had they've been represented well at a lot of conventions, but World of Darkness never really had its own. So if I could provide a tie-in to the tabletop rendition and to the online LARP rendition, provide that, hey, there's all these resources still available to you. I wanted to do so because like, when is there going to be another opportunity? I mean, most cons don't have World of Darkness represented in any capacity, and Renegade and World of Darkness themselves only really attend 2 to 3 cons a year at most. And I was really hoping that we could put more of the brand out there, because call me a company shill, if you will, but like the more the brand succeeds, World of Darkness succeeds, the more the game is going to have longevity, the longer it's going to be around, the more material, we're going to get mage, we're going to get changeling, we're going to get whatever else, hopefully, because the brand continues to grow and succeed. I'm not getting paid by World of Darkness, I'm not getting paid by Renegade, although if they're watching, I am willing to sell out. It's one of those things that I do genuinely want to see World of Darkness succeed. That's all this has ever been about. It's not been about getting me in places, getting me paid, getting anything like that. It's always been about let's build the brand so that this game can exist for a long time. Because speaking again from personal experience, when the Gehenna book came out, when White Wolf was going under, that felt like the end. That really legitimately did. And then when New World of Darkness came out, it seemed like they were like, no, they are truly washing their hands of World of Darkness. Like, it is over. The 20 to 30 years of lore, it's done. They're not revisiting this world. And that was terrifying, to be completely honest. And it did cause me to lose touch with the game for a few years, because I was not interested in relearning everything. I was not interested in picking up a new version of this system. I was interested in what I had fallen in love with. So the fact that it is still going, that it's back alive and kicking, and it is evolving into a streamlined, player friendly, less toxic system, I want to see it succeed long into the future. So that's kind of how that goes. So we proposed to them what we wanted to do. We kind of put out there the games we wanted to run, and the panels we wanted to have. And then things kind of went quiet for a couple of months. I think it was travel plans getting arranged, them making arrangements on their end. But then about a week to 2 weeks before the event is when things really started kicking up, because it had been radio silent for a while. We had not heard anything back. We had said, this is what we're doing. Is this cool? It seemed like it was going to work out. And then things really kicked into high gear. Speaking from personal experience, it was a very stressful couple of weeks leading up to the event. I think that they had a lot on their plate. They were trying to balance. This is a new experience, I think, for them with setting up these events and running these events. So I think that there were, and I would hope they would be modest enough to say, there were first con issues that came up. I know that there wasn't even a solidified schedule until the first day of the event. Our times got moved around because of miscommunications and because of, a lot of back and forth and just kind of not really knowing what was going on. So it was kind of stressful. I'm not gonna lie. Not having a layout for the event to kind of plan around, not knowing for sure what's going when, where, how, where do we have to meet, what resources at our disposal was kind of stressful, and put initially a kind of bad taste in my mouth about the event. Thankfully, that is no longer the case. Things worked out. I'm very happy. I hope to stay involved with them into the future. But definitely in that beginning stage, it was frustrating, and I can't say that I had the highest hopes when I got on that plane to San Antonio, because it was just like, I still don't know what they want from me. I still don't know where I need to be, when, how, with what. It was kind of scattered. What about you two? Tyler, you kind of initially intended to, or kind of came because of our invitation saying, hey, we're bringing the staff out, we're doing these panels. Kind of what was your perspective of that couple of weeks leading into the event itself?
Well, it was a little bit less stressful for me. I was just coming to help, coming to hang out. We weren't sure where we were going to stay and stuff, so that was part of what I was dealing with, is finding Airbnb and getting lodging. I looked at the Hotel Valencia. It was pretty expensive, but they looked like they had nice rooms. We didn't get to check them out. But it would have been interesting to see a little bit more of the hotel. Went there. I brought my Vampire Rivals card game, but people mostly hung out with you guys and did TTRPGs like Werewolf and Vampire, and maybe at the same time.
Well, and if they do have us back next year, we'll definitely put that on the docket for opportunities for them to offer of, hey, we also have somebody who can teach you to play the Rivals game, or at least, maybe get a game going, because that was a cool, and I'm grateful for you bringing that stuff, but I think that was a cool opportunity that we can seize more advantage of next time for sure. Rebecca, what about you, the couple of weeks before the con?
I've done 101 cons before, so I know that things are in flux. I know that first time cons are going to have more things up in the air up until the last minute. Some of the schedule changes were on our end, realistically.
Sure.
I take ownership for that. So, I can't place any fault, stress, or blame on anyone else other than myself for not wording my emails correctly. Um, Gaps in time between responses, with 101 things going on. I was just grateful that they were willing to extend the offer out to us to play games. Not that we wouldn't have found things. I would have ate barbecue every day. That's just gone to find the elusive brisket, freaking
Pulled
pulled
pork.
pork.
Full
The
pork, yeah.
pulled pork, yeah, just, but it was really kind for them to extend that opportunity out to our community because we aren't the only community.
Yeah.
And we aren't the only storytellers. We don't even have like the most followers, but the fact that they were willing and knew that we A, know our stuff with V5, B, have hosted events with 50 plus people. And realistically, when we hosted our events, our KinderCon earlier this year, it also didn't go off without a hitch. And people also had thoughts and opinions on our communication or lack of it leading up to it. So, I can't fault
You and
anybody
I running to the
for,
dollar store while they're setting up at the venue, trying to grab
you know,
whatever we can. Yeah, no,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
don't.
so
I don't fault anyone for. I mean, it is a hard thing to do, and I don't
yeah.
fault them for figuring some of that stuff out. And I think that
Mhm.
it's only going to get better from here. I
Oh,
really do.
100%.
Like, I can walk away from this entire experience saying that it was great and that I would do it again. And I did appreciate that we did have time to still enjoy the city. I wasn't sure if we were going to be busy from dawn to dusk every day or what the situation was going to be, but we did have a great Thursday night, we had a great Friday night, great Saturday night. The whole overall experience was very good. And like I said, I would do it again, and I would encourage others to attend.
Mhm. Oh,
I
yeah.
think that these are worthwhile experiences. If you can afford it and if you can get involved, I mean, if we stay involved with them, hopefully we'll have discount codes still in the future for people to be able to attend these events. But I think it's an experience. It's an unforgettable experience, and it was worth whatever stress that did happen in those couple of weeks to leading up. The payoff was worth that stress. So we arrived. We got settled into our Airbnb. A few of us walked over to a burger place through a neighborhood that was literally run by cats. No joke whatsoever. There was at least 30 cats all lounging on the sidewalks, on the street, in the neighbor yards. But we went to this burger place. It was really good. And then we headed out to the venue, the Hotel Valencia. This was going to be our first time seeing it. And thanks to Tyler's diligent work on finding us a place, we were literally a $6 Uber ride away, which made going to and coming from the venue really, really accessible. And the time of year was perfect. I think the weather was perfect. I know it was a little hot for you, Rebecca, being as hot as your summers get. But for a Florida guy like me, the thought of traveling anywhere in November of all times is harrowing because can only imagine how cold it is. But we got lucky. The weather the week before had been rainy and cold, and when we'd gotten there, it just had ended and was getting warm. It was 80s during the days. It was, high 60s during the nights. It was actually really, really enjoyable. So we headed to the Hotel Valencia where they had a meet and greet for people who were arriving and settling in. They were on this bar balcony that was in the hotel itself off the second floor. That was very nice, very cool. Got to meet people for the first time that I, talked to or heard about, but never had an opportunity to cross paths with. I didn't even realize Cynthia Marie was sitting there for a portion of it. No idea. But yeah, it was cool. We started making connections. We chatted for a little bit, and then we eventually headed back to our Airbnb. What were your guys' experience that first night? What did you think about the kind of meet and greet and everything? Tyler, go ahead.
There was free coffee, so that was nice. I definitely drank a lot of the coffee that was there all day. They had a lot of water around, which was nice. Plenty of seats. We ended up doing our panel in that room, which turned out going pretty well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Rebecca.
enjoy the class. I the first night, the first on that Thursday night, we had a meet and greet, and that was a lot of fun. They had like refreshments and food. I ended up like snagging a whiskey glass from the bar and filling it with queso. So I had like a communal queso thing for everyone at our table. But the really cool thing is that if you ever go to a con, if you go to DE, a future by night studio event, really take advantage of the first night thing, because you really can get like the calm before the storm and kind of meet the people on a more informal face to face, and people are so friendly. We were sitting in the middle bench, and there was a couple tables along the edge of the balcony, and I saw a guy who came over and he just sat, and he was like sitting parallel, and I was like, hey, you want to come sit with us? Like, we're all like we're on the bench like facing, and we're like, we have like 10 seats here, you don't have to sit by yourself. And he's like, oh, okay, sure, and came over and just started talking to us like we'd always been friends. And so people at these events on the whole are pretty
Well, and in a
polite and
post,
friendly, and that was really nice.
yeah, in a post-COVID world, I think we all need kind of a warm up to big social activities. For those of us who've become very introverted, and obviously the gaming community is full of neurodivergency, you do kind of need that time to warm up to, like, okay, I'm going to be spending a weekend with these people. I'm going to see them on the streets, and I'm going to pass them in the halls, and I'm going to, it's good to have that kind of, it was formal but informal at the same time. There was no required expectations for how long you were there or what you did. They didn't like have speakers or anything going. Like, it was just kind of a chill hangout, kind of get comfortable vibe, and I really appreciated that as someone who's been communicating with people through a screen for the majority of the past several years. It was really nice. Plus, getting to see you guys in person and hugs and sitting together was really nice. But yeah, definitely, I do recommend go to the like warm up meet and greet event, because once you get to the LARP, it can be very overwhelming, which was Saturday night. It was a lot of people. There was a lot going on, and so it was nice to at least see some familiar faces who recognized you. And like when you see them at the panels or something later, you can be like, "Oh yeah, remember?" You're already establishing a rapport. So Thursday night went great. Friday, our first day of work, as it were, we got up and arrived at the venue at 11 a.m., where they were wrapping up their kind of starting opening ceremonies, and we were the panel following that up with our bringing the World of Darkness to the World Wide Web panel, which was basically a intro to St. Pete panel. For all intents and purposes, it's how did we put our thing together? How did we transition? How did we make an online LARP-ish format using World of Darkness, and how we've been operating to this very day. And so I think that went really well. We had over a dozen people there, made some really great connections with another group that runs a server from Greece. Other people who kind of saw what we did and were inspired by it. And, we were able to set up a relationship there to the point that we're sharing resources with them and materials with them and saying, like, hey, if you're doing something similar or the same to what we're doing, we did the work. You don't have to. Like, if you want to use our stuff, our character walkthroughs and all that kind of stuff, please do. And it was good to kind of make those connections, and get all that going. After that, we had been signed up to do TTRPG tables, which at first we were going to run a vampire table and a werewolf table. It turns out half of both tables showed up. So we ended up doing a joint werewolf vampire story that I ran, and that ended up being really cool too. And I didn't know how it was going to go. Some of the people had never played either of the tabletop versions before, but I think that ended up being really great. Rebecca played in the game. Tyler got to kind of drift in and out and enjoy the city. Rebecca, what was kind of your experience with that whole tabletop experiment we did the first day?
It was a lot of fun. I hindsight, wish we would not have had the snafu, because we know that people were interested. We had 18 people signed up who wanted to play TTRPGs, but because of everything going on, it just wasn't possible for people to get everything in. But we got enough people to run 2 different games on 2 different days, and it worked out well. And so the vampire and werewolf game was fun. I think it really is a testament to Kent's storytelling ability to just do things on the fly. The only thing is like I had set up this vampire one shot where people were in charge of booths at a farmer's market. So I was like, Kent, you got to include this because their character sheets are 100% based on it. Like the one person, the Lasombra has a puppet show, and the Nosferatu's a beekeeper. Like you can't just put these in a city. Like these are very like farmers market specific. So make it work. And Ken's like, I'll make it work. And he did. He did. And I think people enjoyed the novelty of it all as well, because they got to see werewolf in real time. They got to see vampires that were not, I wouldn't say atypical, but it wasn't like a painting Toreador.
Yeah, it was a very unique kind of setup because we prefabricated all the characters so that we could cut down on the time that it was going to take. And I tried to set the setting in San Antonio, having little to no knowledge of San Antonio other than the previous like 24-ish hours I had been there, plus a drive I had taken through the year prior. But it ended up being a lot of fun, and I think people really enjoyed themselves. And I think there are some new werewolf fans that came out of it. I think, it did help boost the brand, and it did really flex my creative muscles as a storyteller, which was awesome. I mean, it was awesome. It was unique. Game ran about 3 hours with a small break in the middle, and it went really well. After that, it was early afternoon. It was like 4 p.m. I think when we'd gotten done. So we ended up taking a amazing walk down on the Riverwalk, which if you're going to go to San Antonio, if you're going to be even remotely close to San Antonio, you have to take a day to just go check out this Riverwalk. Like it felt like Italy combined with Texas, combined with Spain. Like it was this amazing, amazing experience. I'd driven by it several times, but never knew just how extensive it was and how well laid out it is, and that there's like a Walgreens or something that's on the Riverwalk. Like you would not expect what you see when you get down there and you're actually making that walk. There's boats going by with them doing tours. You don't even have to pay for the boat tour. Just walk along. You can hear the speakers of them giving all the historical facts. But it was, I think we were very fortunate because it also wasn't busy in the city when we were there. The timing of that event somehow worked out so well that we got some of the Day of the Dead flair, which was really cool, but we did not get a lot of people. Like we were able to navigate things very nicely. I did not feel like there were overwhelming crowds. We got sat at a restaurant quickly. We got to walk through the Alamo without, being in a massive humanity. Just the city at that time felt prime for an opportunity for tourists to come in and have a good time without being assaulted by a wall of humanity and smells and sounds and all kinds of stuff. So that was really enjoyable. So let's talk really briefly about just the tourist aspect of it, the city itself. What did you feel? Tyler, you got to see more of the city than I think Rebecca and I did at points. What did you feel about the San Antonio experience?
Yeah, I caught the end of that vampire werewolf game there, but before that, I went and I just walked down to the Alamo. It was about half a mile away, 5-minute, 8-minute walk. Went down there, looked around. It was nice. Just walk around the park area for free and come back around. Went and got a sandwich. Went to Walgreens and visited a few other stores around the area. Was able to come back. We kind of went out and did it again down the Riverwalk. Yeah, I did hear the guy saying this. There's this many shots of tequila in the margarita. I'm like, uh-oh. But yeah, they had some really good margaritas and barbecue there. So we found some nice places to eat, had a nice calm walk, followed the little map. That took us a while, but we figured it out and we got to where we needed to go. So it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. Rebecca, what did you think about San Antonio? you've had previous experience with San Antonio in the
Yeah.
past,
Yeah,
but
I've been
Very
there. I
quickly.
would live on the Riverwalk if I could. I mean, I love it down there. It's cool, it's kitschy, there's a little bit of tourism, but the river goes out of the city. So like you can be on the river walk at different places where it's more lively than others. I really like it a lot. I've walked by the Alamo many a times. I've never gone through it, so that was exciting. I was like, okay, these guys are going and I'm with them, so I guess I'll go to the Alamo. I didn't get to go see the laser light show at the church, which is really cool. And I think that's the one thing we didn't get to do that we mentioned afterwards is that we had one night after the LARP where we walked the streets instead of the river walk, and we should have walked the river walk because
Mhm.
walking it at night versus the day, both very cool. It's the same river walk, and yet that's the different thing when you have all the clubs that are just restaurants in the day, and then you have all the music, and
That
it's
was my
just I
biggest
think
regret, was not doing a nighttime river walk. I really wanted to.
yeah.
Like, we went during the afternoon and it was great. Again,
Yeah.
it was sparse, it wasn't a lot of people, it was perfect, but I
Yeah.
would have loved
Yeah.
to have
Yeah.
seen it lit up. Like, lit up for the evening. I think that would have been really, really cool.
And I think we could have done something on Saturday just or Sunday, just saying. We had a good long sit, which I feel
Well,
like
we
was
did
needed.
something which we'll get
We did
into, but um yeah, it was just the city itself was amazing. Like, you hear a lot about Texas, whatever side of the spectrum, the political spectrum you're on, you hear back and forth about Texas, and you may have some preconceived notions about the state as a whole, but this city was very nice, peaceful. Yes, there was a lot of traffic and everything like that, but it was a very enjoyable experience. There was a lively art scene. There was plenty of shopping, plenty of food. There was plenty to do for sure. I remember driving past the Alamo in my previous times in San Antonio and not being impressed. But then you get there and actually walk through it, and it does feel a lot more
Mhm.
historic and significant than it would be if you just drove past it on the street. You'd be like, there's the church. It's really tiny. It's between skyscrapers. Who gives a crap? But having actually been there and walked the grounds, and they had some like recreationists like showing musket loading and cleaning and stuff off to one side. It was actually very, very impressive. It was very nice. And there were so many cool things, which takes us to Friday night. On our walk during the afternoon, we passed a place called Be Kind Rewind, which looked to be a kind of retro arcade bar. It was so much more than that. So we'd said, we're going back there tonight. We've had our river walk. We're going to go home. We're going to change. We're going to drop our stuff off, and we're going to go back. And so we did end up going back to Be Kind Rewind, and it was awesome. Like, the place had apparently only been open a couple of months, which was very, convenient. We went early enough on a Friday night that it wasn't popping as much as it was later in the evening. But they had a DJ coming in that night. They had halogen everything. They had stand up arcade games, which were free to play, so you could pump in as many credits as you wanted without spending any money. So the three of us ended up beating the Simpsons arcade game
Yeah.
from start to finish, which was really cool. They didn't have a lot of video games, only probably about a dozen at most, including like one of the old fortune telling machines. But they really had a
Looked like
nice
David
dance
Bowie.
floor. Yeah, the drinks were great, and they had what ended up being three different bars in the one bar. They had their primary bar, the Be Kind Rewind. They had a separate little like Miami Vice like cantina hidden in the back, and then they had an outdoor bar and patio area, which I spent a significant amount of time on. Most of you know why if you know me. But yeah, it was really great. They had a DJ booth that was covered in old, kind of like stereo equipment. So it was like the fronts of like boom boxes and CD players and stuff that made up this wall. They were playing 80s and 90s dance club music that night. It was great. I really enjoyed that location. It's someplace I definitely see myself going back. The drinks were good. Nothing was overly or abundantly expensive as far as I could tell, and it was just a really enjoyable evening. What did you guys think of that particular location? We'll get to the second location after that, but
Yeah, I like that place. It was really cool. I had like the 80s music and the arcade games. They had a lot of neon lights and optical illusions and different hidden things. Yeah, I didn't even know there was a different bar until we stumbled into like a whole nother room, and
yeah,
it was
they
pretty
had this
cool.
like hidden hallway that led you through like an Instagram acid trip
Mm.
before you found the like Miami Vice bar. But it was super cool. Like I don't know, it
They
was
had a big
very
Pac-Man
cool.
chair.
Yep, big Pac-Man chair. They had a big Rubik's cube that you could take like Instagram photos on. They had a wall of mirrors. It was trippy. Needless to say, it was
I
very
got the weird
trippy.
science drink and a hurricane.
Yep. What about you, Rebecca? What do you think of Be Kind Rewind?
Oh, it was an interesting thing. I feel like, it's hard to go out to bars when you get to a certain age, for me anyways, because I'm like
Yeah.
I was just like, it's really hard for me to say like, oh, this bar's amazing, but it really was pretty cool. Like, it wasn't overly packed when we were there. All of the drink menus were in old like 80s and early
Old
90s
VHS
movie
tape
cases. Yeah,
cases.
so
Yeah.
like you opened up the VHS case for like Jawbreaker or I don't know, Top Gun or whatever the movie was. You just opened it and your like menus were in there, and then all of the drinks were also like 80s themed. And then in the one room they had the Selena room where they had like the lip chairs, and um they had the other there was an acid hallway that we just kept calling it the acid hallway because like the Rubik's cube was melting into the floor, and then the stuff was like neon color, and
And
then
everything was
when you got
reflecting
into
off the mirrors.
it just was like, and then you had the hallway that had the mirrors with the neon lights, so if you looked at it, it looked like an infinity hallway that just never ended. It was wild. And then there was another hallway that went to nowhere. It had like little dioramas in the wall. And then when you came up to the top, at the end of it, you were actually in this plexiglass stuffed animal thing. And we were looking at it, we're like, what the heck? Or what are we doing? It was a big claw machine. So if people were standing on in front of it, you look like you were inside underneath a claw, and there's like a big button. So you could
I
just
didn't
take a
even
photo
see
like
that. I missed that altogether.
Yeah,
I
I
did
saw the
not even catch that.
it was right behind the Simpsons game, but it was right there. And then the Pac-Man thing with the Eat Me sign was above it. And then like in the Miami room, I thought the coolest part was that they had like a horizontal swimming pool thing. Like the whole thing was like pretty blue shimmery tiles, but they had glued some pool floaties, and then above, like from the projector above it, they had put some water, like moving water things. So I have a video definitely of Tyler and Giuseppe pretending like they're swimming in it. It was a hoot. It was a hoot.
Yeah, the place was called Be Kind Rewind. So if you do find yourself in San Antonio or San Antonio adjacent, I definitely think it is worth the trip to go check that place out. So half of our party split off a little early. Rebecca, Giuseppe, a few others decided to go check out what was called the Gay Strip, which was one strip in San Antonio that had probably five gay bars on it. And they ended up at a place called Pegasus, where they came to find out that this place had a bar, karaoke, and a drag show going on that evening. So Tyler and I stuck at Be Kind Rewind for a little bit, as well as Marcus for a little while longer. But then eventually we made the decision to go meet up with them. This was awesome. Like this outside of the event of everything that happened that whole weekend, this was the highlight for me. It was a drag show broken up into like three acts effectively with little breaks in between. It was outdoors, which was amazing. The weather was perfect for it. There was indoor karaoke, and this place was massive. Like it took up what felt like at least a quarter city block. They had like merchants out front selling certain shaped candles, phallic candles. They had hot dog vendors. They had the drag. It was so cool. Just the entire experience there was great. It was busy. It was very busy, but we managed to get tables to sit and watch the drag show, which was fantastic. We went in, watched a little bit of karaoke before calling it an evening, and we closed the place down. Like, it was 2 o'clock when we were leaving, and everybody was getting Ubers, and thankfully we had gotten to it just before the masses did. But that was unbelievable and just a ridiculous amount of fun. What did you guys think of Pegasus?
That was really fun.
I liked it.
It was really big now that I think of it, because I went in, there were so many bouncers. I'm like, okay, you're cool, you're cool. And I guess once I got in, showed them my ID, I was just doing circles around the karaoke, going to the bathroom, getting drinks, coming back. I liked how it was kind of like Be Kind Rewind, where it had 3 bars almost.
Yep.
So you could get drinks at different places, and I just did laps.
I know they had a leather room. I did not go in the leather room.
I didn't find that place.
Yes, that was an offshoot off of one of the rooms. But yeah, it was there was so much to do just at the one venue. You know, you go to bars and it's like you get whatever they're doing that night. You get karaoke, you get pool, you get whatever they have. This had anything to your taste. Like, if you wanted to sing Frozen or whatever, sing the Madonna song about being frozen very terribly, you could do that. If you wanted to watch a drag show, you could do that. If you wanted to just sit at the bar and chat, you could do that. There was
I left and got pizza and came back.
Yep, like you do.
Next door.
Rebecca, what you think?
So there was someone else in our group and who's on our server, Vlad, and he was at Be Kind Rewind with us because he's like, oh, because I had posted on the By Night Studio, like, hey, because that's another thing. When you go to a LARP, people are just out. Like, if they're not from the city, they don't have other people to go do things with. So if they're not at the con or the event, they'll go hang out with you. So I just put out there, hey, we're at Be Kind Rewind, and he showed up. Yeah. And then afterwards, he's like, I was looking at a thing and he was looking at drag shows too. And I was like, hey, I was looking at this. He's like, yeah, I'm looking at them too. So we're like, we should go. And he's like, yeah, my friend who lives here said that we should go to Pegasus. So I was like, all right, I'm going with Vlad. We're going. So that's when we went out. And then when we were there, I was like, the drinks there were infinitely stronger than at Be Kind Rewind. I think there was more in the one drink that I had at the Pegasus than the 2 drinks I had in total at Be Kind Rewind. Like, it was ridiculous. And I was like, okay, they need to come here. So I'm like texting them now, and then other people showed up because I'm just like texting people like, come to the Pegasus. We will save you a seat. We'll buy you a table, whatever. And it was a hoot. We had mini margaritas. And it is interesting because, like, when you walk in, there's like you said, like a driveway entryway, but it's outdoors. Unlike a club where it's like, here's your door guy. They're just informal. They're just low key. I like low key. Like, it doesn't have to be fancy for me. I know I just got done saying how fancy the DE event was, but this was like, wooden fence, license plates on the wall, subflooring for flooring. You walk in, there's a bar here, then there's like part of a building that was like maybe the original building, or maybe it was built on. I don't know. Maybe it was just a deck with a roof. I don't know. It was very I feel like it was in a very interesting building. But then the karaoke thing was on the complete back room, and the karaoke room I think was the leather den.
Maybe.
I just don't think it was.
No, there was a separate room off of the karaoke room that was, because I saw the writing on the door. It was a different room.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Well, I didn't go. Well, I must have been in there before the party got there because we were the only ones in there. We were not wearing leather. Yeah. So we left to the karaoke side. But yeah, the karaoke side was interesting. They had plenty of bathrooms. The karaoke was killing me, though. I have a video of Kent and I who were like just dying at a couple of the songs. But Giuseppe, who with Modern Artifice, really got the crowd going because there's some people who sang really well and many who did not, but Giuseppe really brought it in with their variety of song choices, Do you remember what they were singing?
Oh,
Yeah,
what?
the Rob Zombie.
Oh yeah, Rob
Right,
Zombie.
right. Dragula. They
Oh
sing
no, yeah,
Dragula.
yeah.
Uh,
It's fantastic.
I do
And
want
people
to.
loved it. People loved it.
I also want to say, people were kind in San Antonio. The service was pretty good across the board. Everybody seemed to be in a good mood. Like, you go to a lot of major cities, you can run into all types, and I do mean all types, where, like, you might not get good service because they know you're a tourist, they know you're going to be gone, that you're not sustained business, they don't care. But every experience I had with businesses, starting at the burger joint we went to the first day, all the way through leaving, everybody was kind. Everybody was, for the most part, chatty, conversational, charismatic, and kind. And that is another testament to San Antonio as a good city. Like, it could have been a nightmare scenario, and it was anything but. I really did find everyone to be pleasant. And that was, again, kind of contrary to what people get projected as Texas being, at least from someone who's from the Midwest and from Florida. Like, it was a very, very enjoyable experience in that regard too. So that was Friday night. I'm gonna kind of speed things up a little bit as we're almost 2 hours into this conversation. Saturday, we had a character creation panel first thing in the morning. That went really well. It was a little bit less of a turnout because we didn't really get the publicity out about it. But the few people that did show up and people kind of trickled in throughout seemed to have a good time and get a new, unique perspective as far as character creation is concerned. And I do want to kind of rehash that panel again as a After Dark special at some point because it was a really good conversation. It was just a really good conversation about building characters in the world of darkness. Then we had games again that evening, but it was again kind of like we weren't sure who was going to show up. At first, we didn't even think we had enough for a game, and we were just going to go out on the city. But we did end up putting a game together, and this is where Rebecca ran her intended, uh, you know, farmers market game as kind of a sequel to the game I had run the day prior, and that ended up being an enjoyable time. Tyler was able to join as a player. I was able to play as a character, even though my character made no sense. It still ended up being a lot of fun. I learned I could save someone with an EpiPen, with that 3 dots in medicine as a Ventru. But it ended up being a lot of fun. And Rebecca, any quick thoughts about that game that you want to share before we get into the Night of the LARP itself, which I think some people have been waiting 2 hours to hear about?
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I had this idea to do a farmers market LARP. In Texas in the South, some of the states that get too hot during the day, they do these markets at night. And so we had a couple little things with food trucks in St. Pete, and I thought, this would be a funky, fun way to do pre-gens. And so I kind of pillaged through the character sheets that we had from season 5, people who didn't necessarily maybe get to play, and I just changed the names, made some few adjustments, but clearly not enough because as they were going through, it was a little bit, what we do in the shadows, where people were like, these character sheets are wild, and I'm like, just make
We'll
it
roll
work,
with it.
make it work, roll with
And we
it,
did.
So
We did. It was
yeah,
fun.
it was fun. I think people had, when that was the other thing, is that we wanted to make it beginner friendly because there were a couple people at both of our games that had never played ever. So
Yeah.
that was fun.
So after that, we went back to the Airbnb. We changed, and we were prepared for the Saturday night main event. The whole reason this entire weekend was happening, the Deep in the Heart LARP that was sponsored by Night Studios, that was canon to their game. Little pretext: we were kind of given ideas to for character creation, but it was kind of a little bit of a rocky road as the rules weren't released right away. We weren't sure if we were supposed to use the V5 book or their book. The book wasn't even in print yet. They hadn't even released the full version of the book. They released a quick pocket guide version of the book. So that was a little bit rocky at first, but eventually we did get our characters ironed out, and we were told that we were going to be divided into factions, that people got to pick a faction, and we were given a brief rundown of each of the factions. There was an executive board faction, which was tailored to Ventrue. There was, a Wilting Rose faction. There was a Hunt Club faction. There was a whole bunch of these groups. We picked a group called Chimera, which was a mercenary faction that was literally there, no allegiances to any particular group. And we wanted it that way, to be honest. We didn't want to be too stuck into anything. So with the Chimera group, there was about like 15 of us, I want to say. The night of the event, we were told to come back to the hotel and to go to a specific meeting location within the hotel. They had divided the factions in various locations in the hotel. And we were going to meet up with our faction, kind of introduce ourselves, and then find out what we were going to be doing that evening. So we were put in this cool, like, half moon room that was a wall of windows. It was a very nice sitting space. We met our VIP, who was our faction leader, who kind of gave us.
He's in chat right now.
He is. He gave us a rundown of what the missions we were given were, and then we kind of tried to divide it up and pick who was going to be doing what. It was kind of a little vague on the details of the missions, and we would come to find out later we were given all of the missions that every other faction had. As the mercenaries, we were basically told, this is what everyone is doing. They're getting a small portion of what you are doing. Whereas we were given everything. We didn't realize this at first, so we were kind of like, there's a lot to do here. We need to divide up and conquer, because, like, if everybody has lists this long, there's going to be a lot going on. So after that, we broke into character almost immediately, started role-playing in the hotel, which was hilarious as a LARPer, seeing people who were just staying at the hotel, people who were not part of this, seeing all these strangely dressed people wandering around, talking funny. That's one of my greatest joys as a LARPer, is being around the normies in character. But after that, we made our way over to the venue, which was probably about 4 blocks away, I want to say, above a bar called Pat O'Reilly's, I believe is what it was called, where there was clearly this event space where they could hold weddings, they could hold, big ceremonies, they could hold anything. This place was massive. It was one of the bigger spaces in a downtown area I had ever personally could imagine of. Like, this place had to be at least 3,000 or 4,000 square feet easily. It was perfect. There were balconies that looked over the downtown walking area where we could hear protesters protesting for Jesus, as well as, Pennywise jumping people for no reason, and just the main thoroughfare of activity going on. But at the event, they got everybody in. The bar was open. Blood bags were being served. We staked out our corner with the couches. And then the event began with the prince addressing the crowd. Cynthia Marie was wonderful. They had a nice little Day of the Dead procession. They had like a memorial table, which ended up being full of props for the game, which at first everyone was like, are we supposed to fuck with this or no? We did anyway. And eventually it took some time to get kind of into what was expected, to figure out, like, what exactly is going on? Like, what are we supposed to do? One of my critiques is I just didn't know who the Storytellers were. Maybe I could have addressed the paper packet that supposedly had their photos in it, but I couldn't tell because the place was dark, it was loud, and it was a sea of people. 120 players shoved into this place, all moving around. I wasn't sure kind of where to begin. Met a few cool people, had some cool conversations in character. I was playing Al, which many of you from St. Pete know can be a very interesting experience, but I was introducing myself as TJ Maxx or JC Penney to people, and they just rolled with it. No questions, no further questions. But that ended up being enjoyable. It was cool to see so many people in so many cool costumes. We did eventually decide to go off the plan and just stop other people from accomplishing their goals. There were like wanted posters that were part of a plot line that we stole all of. There were items that were around. There was just a lot going on. But I still think it was enjoyable. The food was unbelievable. They had like a full buffet table, several buffet tables with steak and butter, with fruits and veggies, with like just all kinds of food all over the place. And it was very cool. I wish I knew what was going on more. I wish I'd known the story. I wish, I wish there was more instruction. I wish the storytellers had badges that was mentioned in the chat earlier. Something to designate them, even if it was like a glow stick that they were dangling from their wrists or something that would say, "Hey, this is a person who can help you find your way." But again, first LARP event, first major con. I think that's just kind of feedback that they're going to get more of and start putting together. But met a lot of very cool people. I do want to take a side moment to talk about Vlad, who Rebecca had mentioned earlier. MVFNP of the entire weekend. This guy, he's incredibly charming, incredibly charismatic. Dude got a dance out of Cynthia Marie, who was not there to dance. Like, just got her to dance, even though she had spent most of her evening, like, in a chair in a separate room, like, kind of hidden away and surrounded by VIPs and stuff. He got her out on the dance floor and had a dance with her. This guy is an all-star. He is just one of the coolest people. I wish I could just have a percentage of the charisma and confidence that this guy has, and it was really cool meeting him. But yeah, the Saturday night event was a spectacle. It was something to behold, and something that I think that while the price of basic admission did seem high for a first con being $200 or $150 with our discount code, which we hope we will be able to provide next time, this kind of made it worth it. I'm not gonna lie. The whole weekend combined with this being the focal point, it did kind of make it worth it. There were a lot of cool people. There was a lot going on. The mystery was intriguing. I just wish I'd known more of it, especially hearing it after the fact from other people like, oh, did you know there were ghosts? Did you know there was like a Wild West robbery? Like, did you know all this stuff had happened? I was like, no, but that sounds amazing. So, yeah, I think it was very cool. Tyler, what did you think about Saturday night?
Saturday night was a lot of fun. We did start off in the hotel. So we had our faction leader, but I also had you guys to lean on. It was my first LARP experience. So I just collected some information. Lasombra was there, and then they went off. And Vlad was also a Lasombra, and he went off and did his thing. And then Marcus went off and did his thing. We went there. We were hanging out on the couch guarding those photos
That we had
for a while.
stolen?
So that was interesting. People went off, and I was eating all the really good food and drinking and getting ready to participate. We had Aurora Shield, which was another faction. The factions were pretty cool. They divided us up, or we chose which ones we wanted to go to, and they had different things. So Giuseppe went, I think, into the Aurora Shield.
Auroral Shield, yes.
Yeah, so we had some of those people hanging around. So
I called them the oral fixation, but that's neither here nor there. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, but a lot of people were also interested in my book. I had this book and was carrying it around, and mine actually, you can put stuff inside of it. So people were looking at me and like, does he have clues? And there was another Tremere that had a big book that she was just writing notes in the whole night. So people came there to write notes. It was cool meeting all the player characters. And yeah, that definitely made it worth the price. The food and the drinks there were really good.
And again, Tick Cheshire was working his ass off that whole night. He was running around as the Herald, talking to people like he was the MVP of the staff of the NPCs that night. Sorry, Tyler.
No, yeah, and yeah, at some point, no one was guarding the photos anymore, so I grabbed one and I took it out to the balcony where you were doing the raid, and you were busy, so I walked around, did another lap around the room, and a Ventrue saw me and he's like, "Hey, what's that? Is that a thing?" I'm like, "Maybe." He's like, "There's a werewolf looking for that." I'm like, "Okay, so I should probably get out of here." He's like, "Hey, werewolf, that's your thing." And they tried to take it from me, but then someone said the prince and the mimic as Dr. Eloise came out and negotiated and said, take it right back to the altar. The prince and the werewolf want it to go back there to calm the spirits. So we walked it over there and I got a boon. And then we added it to the pile of boons that Dr. Eloise had. So it was good going back and forth and being like, hey, Alexi, this is the info I found. And then, hey, Dr. Eloise, here's a boon for us to use, or a coin that we earned.
Yep. Rebecca, go ahead. What'd you think about Saturday?
It was a ton of fun. Like I said, it was chaos. Like with Just Tea Leaf, I have all these like little notes because we had our little reporters. So I was getting notes through the night. I also the hotel, I love the venue that we had, but part of me wishes we would have been able to LARP on that first floor that we had started. Because that was also very cool with the indoor outdoor area. I understand for like logistics with it being an operating hotel. They had like an entire library that was on one area of the floor, and then we had our half moon room, which you were in a public space, but you were secluded over there. Like you couldn't see who was over there unless you walked into it,
Mm-hmm.
and you couldn't see the library from where we were because you had to walk around. And where the if you've
Boardroom
been
was pretty cool.
the boardroom was amazing. They got like soda and they got like pads of paper. I definitely took one, and a pen. And so I used that to, take notes through the night, which was awesome because, like I said, our VIPs, they got the information for us to disseminate, which I think is really, similar to how like the Camarilla might work, right? Like if your Primogen has information, that's what you get. And if they don't tell you, you don't know.
Yeah, point people.
Those are your point people. And just like the Camarilla, you can FAFO. It doesn't matter. Like, not your city. So I think that's what we did. And the procession, like the procession that like came in, they had like all the NPCs come in. So we all got to mix and mingle at the second location. Um, and that was really cool because we were sitting there eating and I was really hungry. So I'm like, I don't know what's going on. So they came in, all the NPCs, like the 7 or 8 NPCs came in and they walked from the one room through it with their little like items, like the scale and like a little like incense thing and like a symbol, like a little bell thing. And they were like doing like this whole single file line. And as they had gone through, people part of the like who were there started following them until they got up to the ofrenda at the start or the front of the room. And what they did is they allowed people who were there, they had asked ahead of time, like bring an in character item to put on the ofrenda that you can get at the end of the night. And so this whole thing had a ton of stuff on it, that little knickknacks and trinkets that people brought up. So it really like gave people a personal connection. But the tomfoolery happened because they put things on there that were part of quest lines that people were staged to or like prompted to take. So that was an interesting like inclusion that I thought really cool in design. Execution was pandemonium. Because like I said, we were the mercenaries. We didn't know. We didn't know that they were going to be on the ofrenda or that people were in other factions tasked with protecting it. So it was kind of like capture the flag in some kind of way because they had competing objectives, which we also didn't know. So we were like, is everyone doing all of this stuff? Like, what are they
So
doing?
much. Well,
It was
and that
so
was
much.
another thing, just hearing like, oh, there's a werewolf here now. Oh, there's a hunter here now. Oh, there's a
And a
mage
mage.
walking around. Oh, there's ghosts possessing people. Like, it was kind of overwhelming, to be completely honest. It was a lot to process, and it was happening kind of rapid fire. Like, you have to think this event was only 5 hours long total, but that includes getting to the hotel, meeting your faction, moving over to the venue, getting that. It was an assault of story and information that was kind of at times a lot, just a lot to digest. And so yeah, so I would ask like what, and this refers to a question that Wolfpack Dice asked earlier. One of our sponsors, Wolfpack Dice, check them out. There are links in the descriptions on Twitch and YouTube to find them. But the question being, what are your major takeaways as a storyteller? And I'm going to add the addendum as a player or a lover of World of Darkness from this event. Tyler, did you learn anything or see anything during this event that you could take away that you could bring to St. Pete by Night or use in St. Pete by Night from this experience?
Yeah, if you're gonna play a grumpy character, you're gonna be more like Rodney Dangerfield in your face about it, and it's like, hey, how you doing? I get no respect. And make sure that you talk to as many people as you can, because if you are just not talking to people, then you're not talking to people. I was pretty hungry, so I spent a lot of time doing that. Some people caught me off guard while I was eating. So just I don't be there to have fun, make your own fun. We came up with some other character ideas and shenanigans, kind of inspired by some of the other people. Rebecca, what did you say that guy was doing? It was like gambling or
Oh yeah,
playing
yeah,
card
they're
games
gambler.
for the coins.
Yep. Yep. So there's going to be
I
a lot
hunt
that we can
people.
bring to future games. I know we have a
Yeah.
great concept that we're not going to completely spoil on Twitch, but there will be a new development, hopefully at the next event, that will be quite interesting. But
Yeah, just
yeah,
having fun characters overall and making the most of your time. If you get like a good shtick going, then you can lean into that and you'll be memorable for someone else while also, having fun.
yeah. Rebecca, any takeaways as a storyteller or a player that you could bring to St. Pete that you might use in our experience going forward on this server?
Maybe. No, I think one of the things I learned is that it's really hard to let someone else be in charge.
You don't say.
Everything went off without a hitch. However, when you're talking, like I was really stressed out. I know, the By Night people know their stuff. They're gonna put on a good show. They are going to have every T crossed, every I dotted. But also coming from our end where we've done similar things, hosting 50 plus people for an event, running things online where we have online events, whether it's, Midnight Circus or Elysium where we have 30, 40 people. It's not our first time hosting. However, it was, I think, for both of us, a first time going to a LARP like this that was hosted by someone else that was to the caliber that we would put in. And they met and exceeded anything that I think you and I like have done,
100%.
like in
100%.
terms, they had more people, they had more pizzazz, they had all the bells and whistles, which is really awesome. So I think, more to your point of what to bring back is like, having that trust because, just if you don't have to have all the details to know that things will work.
I learned a lot about, LARPing from my years and years of experience LARPing, but I feel like this is the one that really showed me how to do a large scale LARP and what I would do differently from what they did. Like they set a really strong framework of, clearly they did a ton of preparation. Like the packets they handed out with the missions, all the props, how to make effective use of the space. Like they put a lot of money and a lot of thought into this. But I do think there were obviously some things that could have been better. Storytellers could have been better highlighted. NPCs, I might have instructed them to dress differently or provided costumes for them because like I couldn't tell the difference between the Justicar and the Scourge. Like they were two good-looking women with dark hair dressed in black. Like unless you picked up on the small features, like the Justicar was wearing gloves, you wouldn't necessarily have been able to tell them apart. I also think having NPCs stationed in locations, especially if they're quest givers, and say like, "This is your spot," and it's not next to all the other NPCs. You have a spot. They have a spot. they have a spot. Because like in an MMO, you could go to them and be like, what information do you have about this? Or like, I have to ask you some questions. But it was really hard to access
Mhm.
some of the NPCs because they were all kind of piled around the prince,
Yeah.
as they would be if this were real life Vampire Society. But it's
Right.
not, it's a game. And they're NPCs and they're there to help push the story along. So I think that having designated locations for this is where you access the prince, this is where you access the seneschal, this is where the baron is if they were an npc, like, this is where these people are, because they'd be running all over the place and it would be hard to track them from one room to the next, or they might be like snuck off into a corner somewhere and you couldn't necessarily know where's the werewolf, where's the, it was really hard to track them. Go ahead.
Yeah,
We
they
did
joked about.
something.
Oh, sorry.
Real
Go
quick, I
ahead.
was gonna
We
say.
Go ahead, Tyler. Then we'll go to Rebecca.
I was gonna say they joked about having the yellow exclamation points over their head, and that almost would have been a nice thing to have.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Rebecca.
we did something similar to that. I think we evolved in a similar fashion with ours online, because when we started, we might like you were the prince, right? And or the sheriff, you were wearing
I
more
was
than one
everyone.
hat. Yeah, and so I think we evolved though, like towards the end, like I bring up the Midnight Circus. We had one storyteller slash person. We brought the hunter players in and some of the mods to play NPCs, and you got a room, and whoever came into that room was who you interacted with, and some of them had a cap, and we didn't have anyone overwhelmed because that's where you could go. And I think that we learned that that was a really good way of doing that. And after that, we had some events where we still kept up with that, but we also had people roam, where we had the last succubus club on. We had stationary npcs, but we also had people roaming, which was helpful. And I think that where we have the advantage online to mark our names and to be on stream, it'll be possible for them, to make that. It's an easy enough adjustment, and it
Well,
was
just
in their plans. So
the detail work is really where it stands out. Having something about you that makes you recognizable. Like, I will credit the sheriff. The sheriff, you knew who they were and where they were. They had enough features about their attire that you could kind of keep an eye on and track them. Whereas other NPCs, like I said, I couldn't tell them apart. I didn't even know they were someone important sometimes.
the
And so I
seneschal.
think the seneschal you could always tell, but that was amazing of the seneschal. They were also an extremely tall person, which helped. But having those kind of details that say like this is a significant person. I don't think the Justicar should have a sash that says Justicar, but something like that, or something that made them stand out more, could have been beneficial. I think another thing I learned is ambiance is important, but not at the cost of gameplay. So at this particular venue, they had a DJ, which was great. They were playing, Day of the Dead-esque music. They were playing club music. When people think of vampires, they think of loud, booming nightclubs and like, that kind of aesthetic and mystique. But the thing was, in all of the venues, even the hotel, it was just so loud. Everything was so loud. And while our vampires might have been able to hear stuff, we are still human playing vampires. So I think that you have to consider, like, there are players who like to go listen in and eavesdrop. There are players who like to spy and like, and it's really hard to do when the venue is super dark, super loud, and you can't get away from it. Like, it's loud everywhere. Um, you can make a place with 120 people silent as the grave or as loud as a stadium, depending on how you manage it. So I think that, yes, ambiance is good, but I think you also have to think, how is this going to affect gameplay? How is this going to interfere with what we're trying to accomplish? If it were just hanging out for the night, like all the players just hanging out, yeah, have a loud DJ, who gives a shit. But if it's a game that has a lot of specific mechanics and a lot of the devil's in the details and like all of these little elements, you really do have to consider how much are we willing to sacrifice ambiance to make sure that the game is playable, to make sure that people can do stuff and not be getting migraines from the thudding bass, that maybe going out on the porch wasn't the best place to hold the scenes because of the people with megaphones out there protesting. Like, you have to consider all of these little things. They had plenty of back hallways and back rooms that they could have taken people off into and said, hey, this is a storyteller zone. So this is where they take you if you're going to an offsite location, and that's where you play out the scene. Or, anything like that could have made a difference. And I felt like it wasn't very clearly designated. Also, I think, honestly, as stupid as it sounds, post a cast list on the wall in a visible place. Just be like, here are the important people of the evening. Here's them, and a picture of them, their name, and what they do. Because when you, even in game, go to a place to visit a vampire court, you'll have done your research. You know who is who, you know who's in the positions of power. Maybe you have a few tidbits of information about them. Again, I didn't even know the prince was Nosferatu. Had no idea. The whole game. Had no idea. That's stuff my character would have known. That's stuff that would be in the political zeitgeist. So I think maybe a little bit more accessible information and a little easier to designate chunks could have been beneficial to the game overall. But again, you can't beat the budget they put into this thing. Like, it was a full blown production, lights, like drapes, all kinds of stuff. It was beautiful. It was engaging. It was an atmosphere. It was a vibe. It was very, very, very cool. So yeah, I think that this gave me the confidence to try something of our own, possibly at a future Kindred Con. It gave me an idea of what kind of preparation you want to put into stuff to make an event like that happen. That having those packets is useful. By having NPCs all have a piece of a story is useful. But also, don't put too much in. 120 people, sure, they're all doing stuff, but there are also overloaded stories. And I do feel like this event was overloaded. Having a werewolf show up and nobody do a damn thing about it. Have a hunter show up and nobody do a damn thing about it. Have a mage wandering around. Have, like, all this stuff. It was a lot. It was a lot, a lot, a lot. And I know they wanted to come out strong. I know they wanted to come out with a bang. But there is such a thing as too much. Too much out the gate. And this did feel a bit bloated, a little heavy in terms of story. They could have just had a few simple quests and let the role play. Like, I loved the ask if someone's killed kind quest. I loved the, find the couple of items quest. I loved the, like, interactive quests that caused you to have to talk to other people. But having all of these crazy big NPCs come in, like a werewolf surrounded by vampires would frenzy. I'm sorry, they would. That's just not, it was too much for me. But again, they came out strong and it was memorable. We're talking about it, obviously. We're talking about the werewolf and the mage and the hunter and all. So it did make a mark. But I do think you have to favor simplicity and playability over trying to impress people with shock value. But yeah, Saturday night was great. Learned a lot. Still enjoyed myself. I was getting a headache by the end of the night, so I was happy we kind of dipped out a little bit early. Yeah, so we went back to the Airbnb, had a nice time, chatted for a while, went to bed. Sunday fun day. We headed
I will
back.
say one last
Yeah.
thing. So if you go to a Darkness Emergent event, they have an intro and an outro for the event. And so we left about 30 minutes early, and I didn't realize this, but they will give their awards and they'll have like an exit thing. So like there was someone who was defanged for their punishment. And so they'll kind of like take note of who did what. And because I had collected so many boons, they gave me status for collecting so much information. So like they make announcements at the end, not kind of like first, second, third place, but they kind of like go faction by faction and call out and like not call out the MVPs, but kind of are like, these people did a lot of stuff tonight, and this is what they did for the better or for the worse. This is your reward, this is your punishment.
And that would have been a cool
So
thing to have been told ahead of time. Hey, don't
yes.
leave early. You know,
Hmm.
there is going to be more. Because I know that
Yeah.
when we left, we were kind of like, okay, we've done everything we wanted, like we thought we could do for the evening. So we just took off. We had no idea
Yeah.
there was going to be award ceremonies or whatever. Like we just didn't know.
Yeah.
So I think
So keep
having
that
a
in mind if you
schedule of
go.
events, even for the LARP itself, saying like, this is when you meet, this is when you move to the venue, this is when food's going to be available, this is how long the open bar is, like this is when there's going to be an award ceremony or a wrap up at the end. That all could have been beneficial. We knew when we were supposed to meet at the hotel, and we knew we were supposed to go to the venue at 7. Other than that, no idea. Um, so yeah, Saturday definitely worth the price of the basic admission. I don't know if I'd have done the $600 myself, but the basic admission, 100%. Um, Sunday, we woke up. We went to the venue to pick up some stuff we had left there, stored there overnight. We caught a kind of wrap up panel, which was very cool. Some of the people in the chat were also at that wrap up panel where they got to ask questions like, hey, what the hell was going on last night? Like, what was the deal with this? And they had all the storytellers up at the front, and they told us what they could, because these are ongoing storylines. And I got a lot of like, really? That was happening? Had no idea. So that was fun and informative, but it also told me again just how grandiose. There was so much stuff happening. It was impossible to catch it all. And as a player, as a viewer, as a lover of the game, it would have been nice to at least been privy to that. If they'd had like, hey, this is when the heist is going down. Even if you're not a part of it, you could observe it. Or, you know, something to just make you feel more involved, because it was very easy to feel cut off and isolated from all of these events. I mean, there were so many things happening. But yeah, so we did the wrap up, and all weekend long, Rebecca had been saying she wanted pulled pork and Texas barbecue. We had tried a place when we were on our river walk on Friday, which was good, but they went a little heavy on the sauce, and it was clearly tailored to tourism. It was not. It was not the real place. So we'd asked every Uber driver and every Lyft driver throughout the whole weekend, "Hey, where's a good place to get barbecue?" A lot of them suggested the typical touristy places downtown, but we were like, no, no, where do you go? Like, where do you go to get? And so we'd found a authentic barbecue place about 20 minutes the opposite direction from downtown of our Airbnb. We took an Uber out there. Unfortunately, the pulled pork was gone. This was the kind of place where they say, we open at 11 and we're open until we run out of stuff. And by the time we'd gotten there at noon, they were out of stuff. They were out of a lot of stuff.
Everything but the sliced and chopped brisket.
Yep.
The sides
And
were
some of
really
the sides. The sides were delicious. There was like Spanish street corn. There was, it was delicious. Mac and cheese, like this really special mac and cheese. But it was cool to have the experience. This was like a side of the road shack that had been like built on and added on over time. You waited in line for like 30 minutes to get in. You ordered at the counter. They put your stuff on a metal tray, and they were like, all right, go eat. Like there wasn't like tape, like there wasn't a lot of silverware. There wasn't, you just went. And so what was it called? Like
2M, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, or
3M,
something like
2M.
that. 2M, I think is what it was called. Um, but it was awesome. It was awesome. That was real Texas barbecue. We all shared a bunch of the brisket and the sides, and then we kind of had some time to kill because I was leaving about 2 or 3 hours before they were even supposed to be at the airport. Uh, and so we all went to the airport together and we got to hang out. We got to talk about the weekend. Vlad was there, which was awesome. Vlad, MVP. Um, but we got to hang out and we got to really, really soak in the entire experience. And despite the stressors, despite some of the things at the, LARP itself that I would have done differently or wish they'd done differently, I think it was a worthwhile experience across the board, and I definitely recommend everyone go. The longer you're a part of St. Pete, the more you're going to get to know people. I'm planning on going to Chicago. Rebecca's planning on going to Chicago. I believe Tyler's planning on going to Chicago. So if anything, come hang out with us. We will make our own fun, as we've said we do. And maybe you can find out what exactly we're doing at the next LARP that is different than what we did. But
Yeah, we
yeah,
had fun at the airport coming up with ideas,
yeah,
or our idea.
it was an amazing bonding experience. I was really happy to see Rebecca and Tyler. I mean, other than seeing them at Kindred Con, which is a new thing, what are the odds I'm going to run across them in the day to day world? It's not. So it is a great community bonding experience. And if you're watching this, you're probably a part of the community, and you can, get closer with us and become a part of this as well because it is a ton, a ton, a ton of fun. And travel is great. Travel can be great, and I did not have any issues with my travel personally. The plane rides were fine. The airports were nice. So just come be a part of it. Tyler, Rebecca, any final takeaways? Tyler, you go first.
No, like I said, it was fun at the airport planning what to do for the next one. I had Whataburger for the first time. I did LARP for the first time. The blood bags were really good. The food was really good.
That Airbnb was awesome.
Airbnb was really nice, really close by. And yeah, San Antonio is a very cool place. I'd like to go there again. I like how they had the river walk, which was down by the river and was its own area. And you look up above you and there's the actual street. So there's a whole nother thing going on up there. And then there's all the skyscrapers and the Alamo close by. Voodoo Donuts was good. I'd like a donut every day. So
Very cool. Rebecca, final takeaways.
By Night Studios knows how to put on an event. They are not new to the LARP scene. They have a history of doing things, doing them well, and this was just a testament to the detail that they can put into an event and just a small glimpse of what they have coming, with it traveling to different cities and the different amenities that each city brings and the time of year that they will be there. They will be at Gen Con. We'll be there at Gen Con. So I imagine that as the feedback rolls in through the survey that they put out, and the staff getting together ahead of time, you're going to see a well-polished, beautiful event that is going to become, a LARP to contend with because they know what they're doing. And as far as the weekend goes, I had some idea of what was going to happen, but I could not have predicted, just the good weather because it had been raining the week before and I'm in Seattle. I was ready for that, but the 80-degree weather, loved it. Even if I was dying of the heat, it was enjoyable. And even if I didn't necessarily know my storyline in the LARP, I had fun doing stuff with the storytellers and the people here from St. Pete, and the panels, were engaging. And I think that a lot of people put a lot of weight into numbers, but I think that if you look at, quality over quantity, I think 100% of the people from our first panel joined our server,
Yep.
So
Cool.
I think that little things like that were really, really made it worth it. Not because we were there trying to get people, but just because we knew we were in good company, and the enjoyment and love for the world of darkness was shared by everyone who was there. And so look forward to Chicago They did say that it could be, originally they said Denver, and so it could be Chicago, could be Denver, and if it's not one, it'll be the other. But without a doubt, 100% they will be at Gen Con, and there will be, is it Las Vegas in the fall?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so good cities, good locations, easy enough to fly in and out of or drive to if you're in the Midwest. Highly recommend looking into it.
Tyler, did you have something else to add?
Oh yeah, I was able to sneak in a couple at the end of the quests. I think when I was taking that photo to the offeranda with the werewolf, that was the end of one of those quests, and then I found a bracelet that was a ward against spirits that I think Giuseppe or somebody left behind, and the storyteller came over to me and was like, "Oh, this is this quest." I'm like, "Oh, I didn't know I was doing that quest," but that was fun. I
Yeah.
snuck in a couple of ending things in there.
Yeah, and there was like Methuselah eyeballs and masks of Asher, and just there was so much going on, which is good because that means there was no shortage of things to do. Just a lot. But yes, it was very enjoyable. It was nice to see our community grow. It was nice to see that the community as a whole is alive and well. I really wasn't sure how many people were going to show up to this thing. I got to be honest. Like, World of Darkness has been kind of dormant for a long time. Even with the stumble start of 5th edition, even with the division between 20th anniversary and 5th edition, it was hard to say whether the community was still doing well. And this event especially told me that, yeah, it is doing well, and that there are people that are going to come back, and people are going to wake up and kind of come out of the woodwork to be a part of this whole thing. And that is just beautiful. That's beautiful. That's amazing. That's wonderful. And I'm just so thrilled to see it. And I hope that means our community continues to thrive and grow. I hope the people who do attend future events do become part of our community, and vice versa, that you put yourself out there. St. Pete isn't the only place to eat, so to speak. You can go and be a part of the local by night events that are starting in your area, or LARPs in your area, or games at the gaming store. Like, the more you're out there talking about World of Darkness, the better World of Darkness will do. And therefore, you'll get your bloodlines and not have to wait 20 years for it. You'll get your, the next book and not have it be delayed for printing over and over again because they didn't get enough pre-orders or whatever. Like, this is how we grow this game in this community, and I'm just so happy to have gotten to be a part of it. And it's getting me out of my cave. It's getting me out on the road and seeing some of my favorite people. And I will definitely be investing and putting time into it in the future. So we do have a dice giveaway. We did not get to talk about this too much, but Rebecca, why don't you take the lead on our dice giveaway for tonight?
Do we have the giveaway bot active on our commands for exclamation point
I don't
giveaway?
think we do.
Well,
I didn't
should.
even know that was a thing.
Okay, so what I'll say is that everybody who is watching right now, if you could just put giveaway in the thing. If you type giveaway in the chat, I will do a thing. I'll see how many people. I'll give it a couple minutes. I
And where are
realize
these
there's
dice coming from?
You have to put
Yeah, there's an actual way. Like, if we have it set up, you
the
have the ability
exclamation
to
point.
do so. Yeah, if you have it set up, but we would have
I don't think
to
I
have
do.
set it up ahead of time. So we're just gonna see who puts it in there, who's listening, who's hung out for the last 3 hours with us. So if you see that, I will see how many of these 19, 20 people who are, yeah, in most times when you have people who are in the chat, sometimes you have some lurky loos, but I feel like we have
We've had a pretty
19.
good
So
amount of
instead of
people hanging in
yeah,
there.
so I feel like instead of doing 1 through 19, I'll see that we have this many people. So I've got 4, 5, 6, 7 total.
Let's see.
Should give it another. Should I give it till? I'll give it until now. So
Yeah, what are we giving away?
I see
We're giving away
6.
dice. I have a couple sets of dice that we are going to give away. We also have some partner vendors that will be giving dice away in the future. So I feel like now is a good time. This is a set of 12 regular dice and 5 dice that can be used for blood dice or whatever. So you can play any Roll the Darkness game with them. You'll have plenty of D10s. Undertone, they do not have an exact date. I can tell you that Chicago will be second half of the month, but it will not be Memorial Day weekend.
So May.
I'll say
We're thinking
of
May
May.
2024.
May 2024.
And it is my intention to run After Dark specials like this either bi-weekly or possibly even weekly, most likely on Saturdays, because this worked out really nicely, where we'll be interviewing players, storytellers, all kinds of good stuff. So keep an eye on the Twitch schedule. Keep an eye on the announcements on Discord. But yeah, this went really, really well. So entries are closed. What are we?
Yep.
Who is
I'm just gonna random number 1 through 7 because there's 7 people who entered. So I'm gonna hit go right here. And it gave me 1. So the first person who said giveaway,
Leisha May.
Leisha May, you're a winner. So I'll send you a pack of dice and yeah, send me your address on Discord or here and I'll get that pack of dice sent to you.
Well, thank you so much to all of you who tuned in for these past 2.5 hours. Darkness Emergent was a blast. It really was. You can follow up with everything they're doing at darknessemergent.com or bynightstudios.com. You can also find them on almost all social media at By Night Studios or some sort of variation of that. So go check them out. Keep your fingers on the pulse of what they're doing. They are doing some pretty impressive stuff. I have heard some rumors about the upcoming Chicago event that could make it something you do not want to miss. So potentially check that out. Check details of that. Start making plans for May of next year. Also, we have our Kindred Con coming up in January. So if you are not in the know about Kindred Con, it is running January 19th through the 21st of 2024. It's not too late to start making travel arrangements. It's not too late to get news about Kindred Con. So let us know on Discord that you want to be added to the Kindred Con chat. And you could potentially come join us in sunny St. Petersburg, Florida in January. Doesn't that sound nice, all of you northern states peoples, to just thaw out a little bit? It is a fun time. We had a great time earlier this year. It's going to be a great time in January. So potentially come and join us and meet more of your fellow St. Pete people in person. Other than that, I'm Kent. This is Rebecca and Tyler. Go follow them on their social medias and support them. And we look forward to seeing you next time on St. Pete by Night. Our next upcoming stream is Tuesday at 10 p.m., where the werewolves from Rage Across Tampa will be seeking out a very important source in helping them reawaken their first cairn in the city of Tampa after they've been dormant for a long time. So come tune into that. We're also going to be airing the other streams of the other games that are currently running starting soon, so keep an eye on the schedule. But we love you. Enjoy the rest of your evening. This has been St. Pete by Night After Dark. Good night, everybody.